For 35 years, my wife Beatrice disappeared every single Thursday afternoon without fail. She told me she was going to a fitness class at the community center, but she always came home smelling like old paper and peppermint candy, not sweat. I never questioned her because a happy marriage is built on trust, and Beatrice was the best woman I ever knew. When she died last week, I thought my life was over. I had no idea the real battle was just beginning. Standing over her fresh grave while the dirt was still falling, my daughter-in-law leaned in and whispered that I was now her responsibility. She did not know that Beatrice left me a key, a ledger, and a secret that would burn her greedy world to the ground. Before I tell you how I destroyed my own son's future, please like and subscribe and tell me in the comments if you have ever been underestimated by your own family. The sound of the first shovel of dirt hitting the mahogany casket was the loudest noise I had ever heard. It was a dull thud that signaled the end of 40 years of partnership. I stood there in my black Sunday suit, feeling the cold Atlanta drizzle seep into my bones. My hands were shaking, not from the cold, but from a grief so hollow it felt like my chest had been scooped out with a spoon. I just wanted a moment of silence. I wanted to say goodbye to the woman who had saved me from a life of loneliness. But silence was a luxury my daughter-in-law Paige was not willing to grant me. The funeral service was barely over, and the guests were still wiping tears from their eyes when I heard her voice. It was sharp and nasal, cutting through the solemn atmosphere like a serrated knife. Paige was standing near the funeral director a few feet away from the open grave. She was not crying. She was pointing a manicured finger at a wreath of white lilies. "I cannot believe you charged us $2,000 for these," she hissed, loud enough for the pastor to turn his head. "They are already wilting at the edges. This is robbery." I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Terrence, my son. He looked tired. His suit was ill-fitting, a size too small around the waist, and he smelled faintly of stale bourbon. He did not move to stop his wife. He just stared at his shoes as if the red clay of Georgia was the most interesting thing in the world. "Paige, please," I whispered, my voice raspy from days of crying. "Not now. Not here." She whipped her head around, her blonde hair whipping against her face. Her eyes were blue ice. There was no sympathy in them, only annoyance. "Desmond. Someone has to watch the finances," she snapped, dropping the respectful title of Dad she used to use when she wanted something. Beatrice would not have wanted us to be ripped off. "This funeral is costing a fortune." My wife's name in her mouth felt like a violation. Beatrice had been a schoolteacher for 3 decades. She was the most generous soul in this neighborhood. She would have given the coat off her back to a stranger. Paige did not know her. Paige only knew that Beatrice lived in a 4-bedroom house in a historic district that was suddenly becoming very trendy and very expensive. I turned away from her, unable to look at the disrespect any longer. The ceremony ended. Friends and neighbors from the community filed past me, shaking my hand. Mrs. Johnson, who ran the bakery, squeezed my hand and told me Beatrice was an angel. Mr. Henderson, the retired postman, hugged me and said the neighborhood would not be the same. They were good people. They were my people. Paige stood by the limo, checking her watch every 30 seconds. She tapped her foot against the pavement. She was bored. She was impatient. She wanted this over with so she could get back to whatever scheme she was running. When the last guest had left, I walked toward the funeral home limousine that was waiting to take me back to my empty house. I needed to be there. I needed to sit in Beatrice's armchair and smell her perfume on the throw pillows. I needed to be alone with my ghosts. I reached for the door handle, but a hand slammed it shut before I could pull it open. I looked up. It was Paige. She was standing between me and the car, her arms crossed over her chest. "You are not going back to that house, Desmond," she said. Her tone was final, like a judge passing a sentence. I blinked, confused. My grief was making my thoughts slow. "What are you talking about, Paige? That is my home." "Not anymore," she said. "Not for tonight. You are in no condition to be alone. You are distraught. You are forgetting things. Remember, you left the stove on last week. I had not left the stove on. I had been boiling water for tea, and she had turned it off before it whistled, claiming I was trying to burn the house down. It was a lie then, and it was a lie now." "I am fine," I said, straightening my back. "I am 66 years old, Paige. I am a retired master electrician. I can take care of myself. I want to go home." Terrence stepped forward then. He put a hand on my arm, but his grip was weak. "Dad, just listen to her," he mumbled, avoiding my eyes. "It is for your own safety. The house is too big. It is full of memories. It will just upset you. Just come stay with us for a few days. Just until we sort things out. Sort things out. The phrase hung in the air, heavy and ominous. Sort what out, I asked, looking from my son to his wife. Paige sighed a dramatic, exaggerated exhale that puffed white in the cold air. The living arrangements. Desmond, she said, speaking slowly as if I were a slow child. We cannot keep that drafty old place running just for one person. The neighborhood is changing. It is not safe for an elderly man to be alone there. We need to discuss your options. We are going to sell it. The world stopped spinning. The air left my lungs. Sell it. My house. The house Beatrice and I bought in 1985. The house where we raised Terrence. The house where I had installed every wire and every light fixture with my own hands. You will do no such thing, I said, my voice low and dangerous. That is my property. My name is on the deed. And so is Mom's, Terrence said quickly. And since she passed without a will, half of it belongs to the estate. We are just trying to be practical, Dad. The market is hot right now. Apex Realty is buying up everything on the block. Apex Realty. The name sounded familiar. Then I remembered. That was the company Paige worked for. She was a sourcing agent. She found properties in black neighborhoods that were gentrifying and helped the company acquire them for cheap to build luxury condos. You want to sell my home to your boss? I asked, looking at Paige. She didn't even blush. I can get us a great deal, she said. A cash offer, no inspections. We can have it closed in 2 weeks. Then we can put you in a nice assisted living facility. There is a budget one upstate that the state subsidizes. It is very clean. Assisted living, subsidized. Budget. She wanted to sell my home, which was worth $500,000 in this market, take the cash and dump me in a state-run nursing home. And my son was letting her. I felt a rage so hot it burned the tears out of my eyes. But I also felt a warning instinct, a deep, primal voice in my gut that told me to be careful. They were 2, and I was 1. They were young, and I was old. If I fought them right here in the cemetery parking lot, they would claim I was hysterical. They would claim I was having a mental breakdown. They would call the police and have me committed for observation. I had to be smarter. I had to be like Beatrice, quiet, observant. I took a deep breath and let my shoulders slump. I forced my face to look defeated. I let the tremor in my hands become visible. Maybe you are right, I whispered, looking at the ground. I am so tired, I just want to sleep. Paige smiled. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered a wounded rabbit. That is the sensible decision, she said, patting my arm with a touch that made my skin crawl. Come on, you can ride with us. We will send the limo away. She turned and walked toward her silver SUV parked a few yards away. Terrence guided me like I was an invalid. I shuffled my feet, playing the part. Paige popped the trunk of the SUV. Put his bag in there, Terrence, she ordered. Terrence took the small overnight bag I had brought to the funeral home. He moved to place it in the trunk. As the trunk lid lifted, I saw it. It was buried under a pile of open house flyers and yoga mats, but the corner was sticking out. A rectangular sign, red and white plastic. I stepped closer, pretending to stumble. I put my hand out to catch myself on the bumper and I looked down. It was a for sale sign. But not just any sign. It had a sticker across the top that read, "Coming soon." And taped to the back of the sign facing up was a printout of a listing description. Historic craftsman, 4 bedrooms. Prime location for redevelopment. Owner motivated, vacant immediately. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. Vacant immediately. They had printed this before the funeral. They had printed this while Beatrice's body was still at the morgue. They had never intended to let me go back home. This was not a discussion. This was an eviction. I looked up and caught Paige watching me in the rearview mirror reflection. She didn't know I had seen the sign. She just saw an old man staring blankly into a trunk. "Get in the car, Desmond," she called out. "It is starting to rain harder." I climbed into the back seat of my son's car. The leather was cold. The air smelled of Paige's expensive perfume and the lingering scent of fast food. As we pulled out of the cemetery gates, leaving my wife behind in the cold ground, I made a vow. They thought they were taking a helpless, senile old man to his prison. They thought they had won the lottery. They were wrong. I looked out the window at the gray sky. I touched the pocket of my suit jacket. Inside was the only thing I had managed to save from the house before the funeral. a small velvet pouch containing Beatrice's reading glasses, and a small brass key she had pressed into my hand minutes before she took her last breath. Thursday, she had whispered. Go to Etta. Thursday. Today was Tuesday. I had to survive 2 days in the house of the enemy. I had to play the fool. I had to let them think they had won. Because come Thursday, I was going to find out what my wife had been doing for 35 years, and then I was going to make them pay for every tear I shed today. I closed my eyes and let my head drop against the headrest. Are you okay, Dad? Terrence asked from the driver's seat. His voice was thick with guilt. I am fine, son, I mumbled, letting my voice trail off into a fake doze. Just fine. I was not fine. I was frozen. Frozen with a cold anger that was sharpening my mind like a razor blade. The car sped up, heading toward their house, heading toward my cage. But they forgot one thing. You never corner a man who has nothing left to lose. The game had just begun. The guest room in my son Terrence's house was not a sanctuary. It was a holding cell with beige walls and a mattress that felt like it was stuffed with rocks. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the closed door, listening to the sounds of a life I was excluded from. It had been 24 hours since the funeral, and I had become a prisoner. My own home, the home Beatrice and I had built with 40 years of love and hard work, was now off limits. Paige had taken my keys. She said I would lose them. She said I was confused. She said a lot of things, but her eyes said she just wanted me out of the way. My stomach rumbled. I had not eaten since the morning. I stood up and walked to the door, turning the handle slowly. It was not locked, but it felt heavy, as if the air pressure on the other side was pushing back against me. I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen. The smell hit me first. Garlic butter, rosemary, and the rich iron scent of searing beef. My mouth watered. Beatrice used to make pot roast on Sundays, but we hadn't had steak in years because we were saving every penny. I rounded the corner into the open-concept kitchen. Paige was standing at the granite island, a glass of red wine in one hand and a spatula in the other. Terrence was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone, his face illuminated by the blue light. 2 thick ribeye steaks were resting on a cutting board, glistening with juice. I cleared my throat. Terrence jumped a little, but Paige just turned her head slowly, sipping her wine. "Hello, Desmond," she said. Her voice was flat. "I am hungry," I said. "That smells good." Paige laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Oh, this isn't for you, Desmond. Rich foods like this will upset your stomach. At your age, digestion is tricky." She reached behind her onto the counter and picked up a grease-stained paper bag. She tossed it onto the table in front of me. It landed with a wet thud. "I got you a number 4 from Burger King," she said. "Soft bun, easy to chew. And I got you a small soda. Don't drink it too fast, or you will accept the bathroom all night." I looked at the bag, then I looked at the steaks, then I looked at my son. "Terrence," I said, my voice steady, "you are going to let me eat a cold hamburger while you eat steak." Terrence finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked away quickly, unable to hold my gaze. "Just eat it, Dad," he mumbled. "Paige knows best. She is just looking out for your health. My health." They were feeding me garbage while they feasted like kings on my dime, probably using money they had already siphoned from my accounts. I wanted to scream. I wanted to flip the table. But I remembered Beatrice. I remembered the key in my pocket. I had to be smart. I had to be the confused old man they wanted me to be. I sat down slowly, my joints popping in the silence. I opened the bag. The burger was lukewarm and squashed. I took a bite, chewing slowly, staring at the wall. Paige turned her back to me and picked up her phone. She dialed a number and put it on speaker as she began to slice the steak. "Hey, Jerry," she said. "Yes, I have the deed paperwork almost ready. The property is practically vacant. We moved the occupant out today. Yes, he is non-hostile. Just a senile old man. He won't be a problem. We can probably schedule the demolition crew for next month." I stopped chewing. Demolition crew. They were not just selling my house. They were going to tear it down. They were going to erase the porch where I proposed to Beatrice. They were going to bulldoze the garden where she grew her prize-winning tomatoes. I swallowed the dry bread. It tasted like ash. "That sounds great," Paige, the man on the phone, said. "Apex is excited. This land is a gold mine. Good work handling the old guy." She hung up and smirked at Terrence. "See, honey, I told you. Everything is under control. Once the sale goes through, we can pay off your little debt and book that trip to Cabo." My son nodded, shoving a piece of steak into his mouth. I finished my burger in silence. I stood up to take my trash to the bin. Leave it, Paige commanded. You will just make a mess. Go to your room, Desmond. We need to have some couple time. I walked back to the beige room. I sat on the bed and waited. I waited until the lights went out. I waited until the house settled into the creaking silence of the suburbs. At 3 in the morning, I opened my door. The house was dark. I needed to get out. I needed to get to my house before they destroyed everything. But the front door had a smart lock, a glowing digital keypad that I did not know the code to. I crept down the hallway, my socks sliding on the hardwood. I approached the front door. The keypad glowed blue in the darkness. I stared at it. I had heard the beeps earlier when Terrence came in. 4 beeps. I closed my eyes and visualized his fingers. He was a simple man, a man of habit. What number would he use? His birthday. No too obvious. My birthday. He probably didn't remember it. Then I remembered the day he won the state football championship in high school, the only day he ever really felt like a winner. Jersey number 82. The year was 2010. I reached out and pressed 8210. The lock buzzed red. Access denied. My heart hammered. I had 2 more tries before it would lock out and probably send an alert to Paige's phone. Think Desmond. Think. What does Paige love? Paige loves herself. I looked at the framed photos on the entry table. There was no photo of me, no photo of Beatrice, just photos of Paige. Paige at the beach, Paige at her graduation, and a photo of Paige and Terrence on their wedding day, November 4th, 1104. I reached out. 110. The lock clicked. The deadbolt slid back with a mechanical whir. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I opened the door, gently wincing as the hinges gave a soft groan. I slipped out into the cool night air. I did not have a car. Paige had the keys to my truck. I had to walk. It was 5 miles to the old neighborhood. I started walking, my dress shoes clicking on the pavement. I walked until my feet blistered. I walked until the sun began to paint the sky purple and orange. When I turned onto my street, the sun was fully up. My chest was tight. I expected to see my house standing quiet and safe. Instead, I saw a white van in the driveway. The side of the van read, "Rapid Cleanout Services." Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my lungs. I ran. I ran faster than a 66-year-old man should be able to run. I bounded up the porch steps and burst through the front door. Inside it was chaos. 3 strangers in blue jumpsuits were moving through my home like locusts. They were sweeping books off shelves into large black garbage bags. They were taking paintings off the walls. "Hey, stop!" I shouted, my voice booming off the bare walls. "Stop it, right now!" A large man with a beard looked up from the living room floor. He was holding Beatrice's ceramic vase, the one she bought in New Orleans. "Who are you?" he asked, bored. "I am the owner," I roared. "Get out of my house!" The man shrugged. Work order came from the owner, a Mrs. Paige Bell. She said, "Clean it out. Everything goes to the dump, vacant property." He turned and dropped the vase into a trash can. The sound of it shattering broke something inside me. "No!" I screamed. I lunged at him. He stepped back, surprised. "Hey, calm down, Pops." I didn't calm down. I looked around wildly. Where was the bedroom? I needed the bedroom. I pushed past him, running down the hall. I entered the master bedroom. It was already stripped. The mattress was bare. The dresser drawers were pulled out and emptied. There was a pile of black bags in the corner. My eyes scanned the room. Where was it? Then I saw it. A worker was holding a heavy wool coat. It was a gray trench coat, Beatrice's winter coat. The one she wore when it rained, the one she wore every Thursday. He was balling it up to stuff it into a bag. "Give me that!" I shouted, grabbing the sleeve of the coat. The worker pulled back. "Hey, let go, man. It is just old rags. It is my wife's coat," I snarled, yanking it with all my strength. The worker was young and strong, but I was fueled by a rage that burned like a furnace. I twisted the fabric and pulled. He lost his grip and stumbled back. I clutched the coat to my chest, smelling the faint scent of peppermint and lavender that still lingered on the collar. Tears pricked my eyes. I ran my hands over the fabric, checking it. It felt heavy, heavier than wool should be. I felt the lining near the hem. There was something there, a rectangular shape sewn inside the silk lining. I ripped the fabric. I didn't care about ruining the coat. I needed to see what was inside. My fingers brushed against cool leather. I pulled it out. It was a small black notebook, old and worn with the corners bent. I opened it. The pages were filled with Beatrice's neat cursive handwriting. Dates, amounts, and notes. I flipped to the last used page. Thursday. Deposit complete. Interest collected from Mr. Henderson's loan. Refinanced the bakery for Mrs. Johnson. Balance updated. I frowned. Loans. Refinancing. Beatrice was a teacher. What was this? Then I saw a folded piece of paper tucked into the back flap. I unfolded it. It was a letter addressed to me. My dearest Desmond, if you are reading this, I am gone. I never told you because I wanted to protect us. I wanted us to live simply. But I didn't just save money, Desmond. I invested in our people. I own the debt on half this neighborhood. And now you do too. Go to Etta. Use the key. The room spun. My wife didn't just go to the bank to deposit checks. She was the bank. She was buying up the neighborhood from the inside out to keep the developers away, to keep people like Paige away. I heard a car door slam outside, then the click of heels on the walkway. Paige. I shoved the notebook into my waistband under my shirt. I draped the coat over my arm. Paige stormed into the bedroom, her face red with fury. Terrence was trailing behind her, looking terrified. "What do you think you are doing?" she screamed. "You escaped. You broke into this house. I am calling the police. I am going to have you committed today, Desmond. This is insane behavior." She looked at the workers. "Why did you let him in? Keep working. Get this trash out of here." One of the workers reached for the coat in my arms. I stepped back. I stood tall. I looked Paige in the eye. "This is not trash," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And neither am I." Paige laughed a cruel sound. "You are a confused old man holding a dirty coat. Now get in the car or I swear I will call the sheriff and have you dragged out in handcuffs." I looked at Terrence. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He was letting her do this. He was letting her erase his mother. I took a deep breath. I felt the notebook pressing against my skin. It was hot, like a brand. "Fine," I said. "I will go." I walked past her. I walked out of the house that was no longer mine. But I walked with a new rhythm. Paige thought she had won. She thought she had scared me into submission. She didn't know I was walking out with the weapon that would end her career. I got into the back seat of her car. I clutched the coat. Tomorrow was Thursday. Tomorrow I would go to the bank. And tomorrow Paige would learn that you never declare war on a man who owns the battlefield. Thursday morning arrived with a gray sky that matched the concrete jungle of downtown Atlanta. I stood at the bus stop, shivering slightly in my thin windbreaker. Paige had taken my heavy coat, the one Beatrice bought me, but I had managed to snatch my old work jacket from the closet before she locked me out. I looked like a man down on his luck, a man who had lost everything. And to the people driving by in their luxury sedans, that is exactly what I was. Just another old black man waiting for the bus in a neighborhood that was rapidly trying to price him out. I checked my watch. It was 9 o'clock. Paige was at her office, probably bragging to her boss about how she had secured the deed to my house. Terrence was likely sleeping off his hangover. They thought I was walking to the park to feed the pigeons. They thought I was harmless. The number 3 bus groaned to a halt in front of me. I climbed the steps, my knees popping. The driver, a young woman with tired eyes, nodded at me. I moved to the back, finding a seat by the window. As the bus lurched forward, I watched my city pass by. I saw the changes Beatrice and I had whispered about on our front porch for years. The old soul food joint on Martin Luther King Drive was gone, replaced by a yoga studio with a glass front. The barber shop where I got my first haircut was still there, but it was flanked by a high-end coffee shop selling $6 lattes and a boutique dog grooming salon. Gentrification. It was a fancy word for erasure. It was a slow-moving wave that washed away history and left behind sterile, expensive condos. And my daughter-in-law, Paige, was riding the crest of that wave on a surfboard made of greed. I got off the bus 2 blocks from Community First Bank. The bank was a small brick building that had stood on the corner since the 60s. It didn't look like much. The sign was faded from the sun. The windows were small. It was nothing like the glass and steel fortresses Paige banked with. She called those places financial centers. She called Community First a relic. She had laughed about it once at dinner. "Why does your mother bank there, Terrence?" she had asked. "They probably still use an abacus. It is embarrassing." I walked up the steps and pushed open the heavy wooden door. A bell chimed above my head. The air inside smelled of floor wax and old paper. It was a smell that reminded me of Sunday school. It was the smell of stability. The lobby was quiet. There were no digital touchscreens, no slick marketing posters promising low-interest loans that exploded after a year, just a row of teller windows behind thick glass and a few sturdy oak desks. "May I help you, sir?" a security guard asked. He was an older man, his uniform pressed sharp. "I am here to see Mrs. Etta," I said. "My name is Desmond Bell." The guard's face softened instantly. "Mr. Bell, we heard about Mrs. Beatrice. We are so sorry for your loss." She was a pillar, a true pillar. He didn't ask for ID. He didn't ask if I had an appointment. He just pointed to the corner office. "She is expecting you." I walked toward the office. The door opened before I reached it. Etta stood there. She was a small woman with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that had seen everything this neighborhood had to offer. She wore a sensible navy suit and pearls. "Desmond," she said softly. She didn't offer a handshake. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of rose water and strength. I felt my composure crack. "I miss her, Etta," I whispered. "I know," she said, patting my back. "I know. But you are here. And it is Thursday. She said you would come on a Thursday." She pulled back and looked me in the eye. "You have the key." I nodded, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out the small brass key Beatrice had given me on her deathbed. Etta nodded solemnly. "Come with me." We walked past the tellers to the back of the bank. We stood before the heavy steel gate of the vault. Etta punched in a code and turned a wheel. The gate swung open with a groan of heavy metal. Inside, the air was cool and still. Walls of safety deposit boxes lined the room. "Box 404, Etta said, pointing to a large box at eye level. I inserted my key. Etta inserted hers. We turned them together. The lock clicked. I pulled the box out. It was heavy, heavier than I expected. My heart began to race. Was it gold? Was it cash? Had Beatrice been hoarding coins for 35 years? I carried the box to a small private viewing room Etta gestured toward. She closed the door, leaving me alone. I sat down at the table. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. There was no gold. There were no stacks of $100 bills. There was just paper. Stacks and stacks of paper neatly organized in manila envelopes. I felt a pang of disappointment. What was this? Old letters. Recipes. I reached for the first envelope. It was labeled The Johnson Bakery. I opened it. Inside was a legal document, a promissory note. Loan amount $50,000. Lender Beatrice Bell. Borrower Marcus Johnson. Status paid in full. Interest forgiven. I frowned. Mrs. Johnson's Bakery. The one that almost closed 5 years ago when her husband got sick. Everyone thought the bank saved them. I picked up the next envelope. Carter's Barber Shop. Inside was a deed of trust. Beatrice held the lien on the property. She had refinanced his predatory loan from a commercial lender and given him a fixed rate of 1%. I started going through the envelopes faster, my breath catching in my throat. The community garden lot. Deed. Owner Beatrice Bell. The old hardware store. Deed. Owner Beatrice Bell. The corner grocery. Commercial lease agreement. Landlord Beatrice Bell. My hands were trembling so hard I dropped a document. It fluttered to the floor. I picked it up. It was a map of our neighborhood. Beatrice had color-coded it. Blue squares were properties she owned outright. Green squares were businesses she held the debt for. I stared at the map. The blue and green squares formed a wall, a literal fortress around the heart of our community. Beatrice hadn't been going to the bank to deposit $50 a week. She had been meeting with Etta to strategize. She had been using her salary, her pension, and the shrewd investments she made in the 80s to quietly buy up the neighborhood. She was buying the debt of her neighbors to stop them from being foreclosed on. She was buying the commercial lots to keep the developers out. I picked up a ledger from the bottom of the box. I opened it. The final entry was dated 2 weeks ago. Offer from Apex Realty for the hardware store lot, $2 million. Status rejected. Note, they will never get this land. Not while I breathe. I leaned back in the chair. The room spun. My wife, the quiet schoolteacher who darned my socks and clipped coupons, was the largest commercial landowner in our district. She was the secret landlord of half the businesses on Main Street. She was the reason Apex Realty hadn't been able to bulldoze our history. She was the invisible wall they kept crashing into. and she had never told a soul, not even me. I realized then why she lived so simply, why we drove old cars, why she never bought fancy clothes. Every spare dollar went into this box. Every penny was a brick in the wall she was building to protect us. She knew. She knew that people like Paige were coming. She knew that money was a weapon, and she had been stockpiling ammunition for 35 years. I looked at the total valuation Etta had penciled in the back of the ledger. The land alone was worth $12 million. The debt she held was worth another $3 million. I was sitting on $15 million of leverage, and I was the sole beneficiary. A sob ripped from my throat. It wasn't a sob of joy. It was a sob of pure, overwhelming awe. I thought about Paige calling Beatrice a hoarder. I thought about Terrence calling his mother simple. They had no idea. They were playing checkers, and Beatrice had been playing three-dimensional chess for 3 decades. She had sacrificed the appearance of wealth for the reality of power. I cried for her silence. I cried for the burden she carried alone. She had walked these streets knowing she owned them, and yet she treated everyone with the same humble grace. She was a queen in disguise. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. The tears stopped. A cold clarity replaced them. I looked at the map again. I looked at the red circle Beatrice had drawn around our house. "Do not sell," she had written in red ink. "This is the keystone." I understood now. Our house wasn't just a house. It was the connector. It sat on the double lot that connected the commercial district to the residential zone. If Apex got our house, they could petition the city for rezoning. They could break the wall. That was why Paige was so desperate. That was why she had a buyer lined up before the funeral. She needed that keystone, and she thought she had taken it from a helpless old man. I stood up. I put the papers back in the envelopes. I put the envelopes back in the box. I was not just a retired electrician anymore. I was the guardian of the wall. I was the keeper of the gate. I walked out of the viewing room. Etta was waiting for me. She saw my face, and she smiled. A small, knowing smile. "You know now," she said. "I know," I replied. She handed me a thick manila folder. "This is the rest of it," she said. "The legal trust she set up. It activates upon her death. You are the sole trustee, Desmond. You have absolute power over the assets. You can sell them, you can keep them, you can burn them. It is all yours." I took the folder. It felt heavy like a shield. "I am not selling," I said. Etta nodded. I didn't think so. Beatrice chose well. I walked out of the bank. The sun had broken through the gray clouds. The street looked different now. I didn't see run-down buildings. I saw my wife's legacy. I saw the bakery she saved. I saw the barbershop she protected. I saw the empire she had built for us. I walked to the bus stop. I had to go back to Paige's house. I had to go back to the cage. But I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was the warden. I patted the folder tucked securely inside my jacket. Paige wanted to talk about real estate. She wanted to talk about assets and liabilities. Fine, we would talk. But first I had a phone call to make. I needed a lawyer, not just any lawyer. I needed the shark that Beatrice had been feeding for years. I pulled out the notebook again and found the name listed under emergency contacts, Harper Vance, attorney at law. I dialed the number. Beatrice had prepared the battlefield. Now it was time for me to go to war. The return trip to the suburbs felt like a military operation behind enemy lines. I clutched the manila folder to my chest under my jacket, feeling the sharp edges of the paper digging into my ribs. That folder was not just paper. It was a loaded gun. It was the deed to the neighborhood and the salvation of my dignity. But for now, it was contraband. If Paige found it before I was ready, everything Beatrice had built would turn to ash. I got off the bus a block away from my son's house. I checked my watch. It was 11 in the morning. Paige usually took her lunch break around noon, but she worked from home on Thursdays. I had to be silent. I had to be invisible. I approached the front door. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my sternum. I punched in the code, 1104. The lock clicked. I slipped inside and closed the door with the gentlest click I could manage. The house was cool and smelled of lemon polish and ambition. I crept down the hallway to the guest room. I needed a hiding spot, a place Paige would never look. She was the type of woman who checked surfaces but never looked underneath things. She lived on the surface. I knelt by the dresser. It was a cheap particle board piece. I pulled out the bottom drawer. There was a gap between the bottom of the drawer and the floor. I taped the thick envelope to the underside of the drawer using a roll of duct tape I found in the kitchen junk drawer earlier. I slid the drawer back in. It looked normal. It was perfect. Just as I stood up, I heard a voice. It was coming from the home office down the hall. It was Paige. Her voice was different than the one she used with me. It was sharper, professional, predatory. I walked softly to the door. It was cracked open an inch. I peered through the gap. Paige was sitting at her desk in front of a large monitor. She was wearing a blazer over her pajamas. She was on a video call. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," she said, nodding vigorously. "The acquisition is proceeding ahead of schedule. The occupant has been removed from the premises. We have control of the property." I leaned closer, holding my breath. "Yes, the Keystone lot," she continued. "I know the timeline for the Apex shopping plaza is tight. I guarantee you will have the deed on your desk by Monday morning. The demolition crew can start grading the land on Wednesday." My hands clenched into fists. Wednesday. Today was Thursday. She was planning to bulldoze my life in less than a week. A shopping plaza. She wanted to turn Beatrice's garden into a parking lot for a chain coffee shop. She laughed a sound that lacked all warmth. "Oh, do not worry about legal pushback. The owner is my father-in-law. He is suffering from rapid cognitive decline. He does not even know what day it is. We are filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow. Once the judge signs off, I sign the deed. It is a done deal." I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. Guardianship. She was going to declare me incompetent. She was going to take away my legal rights to stop me from fighting back. Then the front door opened. I jumped back from the office door and pressed myself into the shadows of the hallway. Terrence walked in. He looked terrible. His skin was gray, and he was sweating despite the air conditioning. He walked straight into the office without knocking. Paige looked up annoyed. "Terrence, I am on a call with the regional director." Terrence didn't care. He paced the small room, running his hands through his hair. "I need to talk to you, Paige. Now. It is urgent." Paige rolled her eyes at the camera. "One moment, sir. A domestic issue." She muted the call and spun her chair around. "What is it, Terrence?" she hissed. "You are embarrassing me." "It is Rocco," Terrence whispered, but his voice was shrill with panic. "He called me again. He said time is up. He said if I do not have the 50,000 by Monday, he is going to start taking fingers." I froze. Rocco. That was not a bank. That was a loan shark. My son was not just in debt. He was in deep with criminals. Paige sighed, rubbing her temples. "Terrence, how many times do we have to go over this? We need the house sale to go through. That is your bailout. Your father's house is worth 400,000 in cash to Apex. Once we get that check, I will pay off your little gambling problem. But you have to keep it together. I cannot wait until the sale closes," Terrence pleaded. "I need cash now. Can we take a bridge loan against the equity? Can we borrow from the company?" "No," Paige snapped. "That is embezzlement. I am not going to jail because you cannot stop betting on horses. You just have to manage Rocco for 3 more days. Just 3 days. Get your father to sign the power of attorney paperwork tonight. If he signs it voluntarily, we do not have to wait for the court." Terrence looked sick. "He is not going to sign it, Paige. He is stubborn. He is not crazy. He knows what he is doing." Paige stood up. She walked over to Terrence and grabbed his face in her hands. She looked like she was comforting him, but her nails dug into his skin. "He is crazy if we say he is crazy," she whispered. "We control the narrative, Terrence. He is old. He is grieving. He is confused. We just have to help him show everyone how confused he is. Do you understand?" Terrence nodded slowly. "I understand." "Good. Now get out. I have to close this deal." I backed away silently. My heart was breaking. My son was not just weak. He was desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. He was willing to sacrifice me to save his own skin. He was willing to let his wife paint me as a lunatic so he could pay off a bookie. I retreated to the guest room. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall. They wanted a crazy old man. They wanted a senile fool who could not be trusted with a toaster, let alone a property deed. Fine. I would give them exactly what they wanted. I would give them a performance worthy of an Oscar. I would make them so confident in my incompetence that they would never see the knife coming until it was buried in their backs. I stood up. I messed up my hair. I pulled my shirt untucked so it hung sloppily on one side. I unzipped my fly just a little bit, just enough to look careless and undignified. I walked out of the room. I shuffled my feet, dragging them on the floor. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I walked into the kitchen where Terrence was drinking a glass of water with shaking hands. I stared at him blankly. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice tremulous and high. Terrence turned around. "Dad, it is me. Terrence, your son." I squinted at him. "Terry." "No, Terry is a little boy. You are too big." "Where is Beatrice?" "I want Beatrice. She said she was making pancakes." Terrence looked at me with a mixture of relief and sadness. "Dad, Mom is gone. Remember?" I shook my head violently. No, she is at the store. She is getting syrup. I will wait here." I sat down at the kitchen table. I picked up a napkin and started tearing it into tiny strips, piling them up like snow. Paige walked into the kitchen. She looked at me tearing the napkin. She looked at my unzipped fly. A smile curled on her lips. "See?" she said to Terrence. "I told you, he is losing it fast." The stress of the funeral pushed him over the edge. "This is perfect." I looked up at her. "Hello, nurse," I said. "Is it time for my medicine? The red pill or the blue one?" Paige laughed. It was a cold victory sound. "Yes, Desmond. It will be time for your medicine soon. Very soon." I stood up abruptly, knocking the chair back. It clattered to the floor. "I have to go," I announced. "Where do you have to go?" Dad Terrence asked, reaching out to steady the chair. "To the toilet," I shouted. I walked down the hall to the powder room. I went inside and left the door wide open. I stood over the toilet. I flushed it 3 times without doing anything. Then I turned on the sink faucet full blast and let the water run. I walked back out, leaving the water running, leaving the toilet gurgling. "Dad, you left the water on?" Terrence said, rushing past me to turn it off. "I did not," I argued. "It was the rain. The roof is leaking. Beatrice needs to call the roofer." I walked back to the guest room, muttering to myself about leaking roofs and pancake syrup. I sat on the bed and listened. "He is totally gone," Paige said, her voice echoing from the kitchen. "We do not even need to forge the signature. The doctor will take one look at him and sign the commitment papers. We can have him in the facility by Sunday." "We should feel bad," Terrence mumbled. "We should feel rich," Paige corrected. "Focus on the money, honey. Focus on your fingers staying attached to your hand." I lay back on the bed. I stared at the ceiling. They took the bait. They thought I was a broken old man losing his mind. They thought I was helpless. They didn't know that under the mattress was the power to destroy them. They didn't know that while they were planning to sell my house, I was planning to foreclose on their entire lives. I closed my eyes. "Play the fool," Desmond Beatrice's voice whispered in my memory. "Play the fool and watch them hang themselves." I smiled a small secret smile. Let them bring the doctors. Let them bring the lawyers. I was ready. The trap was set, and they were walking right into it. Friday evening arrived with the nervous energy of a bomb squad trying to defuse a live explosive. Paige was vibrating with anxiety. Her boss, Mr. Sterling, was coming for dinner. This was the man who held the keys to her career, the man who could fire her for missing her quota or promote her to regional manager if she delivered the deed to my house. She marched into the guest room at 5 o'clock holding a bundle of clothes that smelled of mothballs and damp basements. "Put these on," she ordered, tossing the pile onto the bed. I looked at the clothes. It was an old pair of gardening trousers stained with grass at the knees and a flannel shirt that was missing 2 buttons. They were my work clothes from 20 years ago, clothes I kept in a box in the garage for painting or fixing the plumbing. "Why?" I asked, letting my voice quaver. "I have my suit." Beatrice liked my suit. "You are not wearing a suit," Desmond Paige snapped. "You are a charity case. Mr. Sterling needs to see that we are taking care of a confused, helpless, indigent old man. If you look too put together, he might ask why you haven't signed the papers yet. He needs to see that you are mentally gone. You need to look the part." She wanted me to be a prop. She wanted me to be the visual evidence of her burden. I picked up the flannel shirt. My hands shook partly from acting and partly from the rage boiling in my veins. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, Paige, whatever you say. Good. And remember, you do not speak unless spoken to. You eat your soup. You smile. And if you have to use the bathroom, you ask me first. I do not want any accidents in front of the CEO of Apex Realty." She spun on her heel and marched out. I dressed slowly. The pants were loose around my waist. The shirt hung off my shoulders. I looked in the mirror. I didn't see a broken man. I saw a man in costume. I saw a soldier putting on camouflage. I checked my pocket. I had my burner phone, the one lawyer Harper had given me that morning at the diner. It was small and silent. I also had the small USB drive Harper had given me. If you can get his phone, Harper had said, just plug this in for 30 seconds. It will clone the SIM and give us remote access to his messages. We need to know who his loan shark is. It was a long shot. Terrence never let his phone out of his sight. But tonight was going to be chaotic. I would make sure of that. I walked out to the living room. The house had been transformed. Fresh flowers were on every surface. The lighting was dimmed to a golden glow. And in the center of the room sat Paige's pride and joy, the white Italian leather sofa. She had bought it 3 months ago for $5,000. She didn't let anyone sit on it. It was pure, pristine white. It was a monument to her vanity. I stood in the corner, my hands clasped in front of me, trying to look as pathetic as possible. The doorbell rang. Paige smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and opened the door. "Mr. Sterling," she exclaimed, her voice pitching up an octave. "Welcome. Please come in." Mr. Sterling walked in. He was a tall man with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. He had the eyes of a shark, dead and constantly moving. "Paige," he said, his voice booming. "Lovely home. Very suburban." "Thank you, sir," Paige beamed. "Let me take your coat." Sterling looked around the room. His eyes landed on me. He frowned. "And this must be the problem," he said, pointing at me with his chin. Paige rushed to my side, grabbing my arm with a grip that pinched. "Yes, this is my father-in-law, Desmond. As I told you, his mind is failing. He is very confused. We are just waiting for the court order on Monday so we can finalize the transfer of the property." Sterling walked up to me. He looked me up and down, taking in the stained pants and the missing buttons. He didn't see a person. He saw a signature. "Can you hear me, old-timer?" he asked, speaking loudly. I stared at his tie. It was red silk. "Hello," I said softly. "Are you the doctor?" Sterling laughed, a harsh barking sound. "No, I am the man who is going to turn your rat trap of a house into a gold mine." He turned to Paige. "He looks ready for the glue factory. Good work, Paige. It is tragic, really, but progress requires sacrifice." We moved to the dining room. I was seated at the far end of the table, away from the fine china. Terrence sat opposite me, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. Dinner was a tense affair. Paige had catered a 4-course meal. She poured expensive red wine into crystal glasses. Sterling drank deeply and began to talk. He talked about his boat. He talked about his third wife, and then he started talking about my neighborhood. "You know, Paige," he said, swirling his wine, "that district has been a blight on Atlanta for decades. It is prime real estate held hostage by people who do not understand value." I gripped my spoon. My knuckles turned white. "They sit on these properties," Sterling continued. "They let them rot. They have no vision. It is our duty really to go in there and clean it up. We are doing them a favor. We are washing away the grime and bringing in civilization." He was talking about my friends. He was talking about Mrs. Johnson's bakery, where she gave free bread to the homeless. He was talking about the barber shop where men discussed politics and raised their sons. He called it grime. And Paige nodded. She sipped her wine and nodded. "You are so right, sir," she said. "It is a waste. Desmond here has lived on that double lot for 40 years, and what does he have to show for it? Weeds and memories. It is time for a change. It is time for a better class of people to move in. A better class of people." She looked at me and smiled a cold, thin smile. Terrence stared at his plate. He didn't say a word. He didn't defend his home. He didn't defend his father. He was a coward bought and paid for by his wife's ambition and his own gambling debts. I felt a fire in my belly. It was the same fire Beatrice had when she marched on City Hall in the 90s. It was the fire of dignity. I watched Paige refill Sterling's glass. Then she refilled her own. She left the bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon on the table near me. I looked at the white sofa in the living room, visible through the archway. It was gleaming under the track lighting. It was time for a scene. I stood up. My legs shook. "Where are you going, Desmond?" Paige snapped. "Sit down." "I have to go," I mumbled. "I have to go home." "Sit down," she hissed. "You are not going anywhere." I reached for my water glass, but my hand swatted the bottle of red wine instead. It wasn't a little nudge. It was a hard, calculated shove, disguised as a tremor. The heavy bottle tipped. It hit the edge of the table. It spun in the air, spraying dark red liquid in a wide arc. It splashed across the table. It hit Sterling's gray suit. But mostly it flew straight onto the pristine white Italian leather sofa just a few feet away. The bottle hit the floor and shattered. For a second, there was absolute silence. The red stain on the white leather bloomed like a gunshot wound, spreading fast and soaking deep. Then Paige screamed. "My sofa," she shrieked. "My sofa. You stupid old man!" She jumped up, knocking her chair over. She grabbed napkins from the table and ran toward the living room, dabbing frantically at the leather, which was only smearing the stain deeper. "Get water, Terrence," she screamed. "Get the club soda. Move!" Terrence jumped up. He ran to the kitchen. Sterling stood up, brushing wine off his sleeve, his face purple with rage. "Look at what you did, you moron!" he shouted at me. I stood there trembling, my hands raised in fake apology. "I am sorry," I wailed. "I am sorry." I thought it was the ketchup. In the chaos, Terrence had left his phone on the table. It was right there next to his plate, face down. Paige was on her knees by the sofa, crying and cursing. Terrence was in the kitchen, rummaging for cleaning supplies. Sterling was busy wiping his suit with a napkin. Nobody was looking at me. I reached out. My hand was steady now. I grabbed Terrence's phone. I slipped the small USB drive from my pocket and jammed it into the charging port. I held my breath. I counted. 1, 2, 3. The screen lit up. A small green bar appeared at the top. Data syncing. "Come on," I whispered. "Come on!" Paige was screaming from the living room. "It is ruined. $5,000. It is ruined." Terrence ran back in with a bottle of spray cleaner. He dropped it. He picked it up. He was panicking. 10 seconds. Sterling turned to look at me. "You should be in a home," he spat. "You are a menace." I stared at him blankly. "I like ketchup," I said. 15 seconds. The bar was halfway. Paige stood up, her dress stained with wine from kneeling on the floor. "Get him out of here," she screamed at Terrence. "Get him out of my sight before I kill him." Terrence ran toward me. "Dad, come on. You have to go to your room. 20 seconds. The bar turned green. "Transfer complete." I pulled the USB drive out and palmed it just as Terrence grabbed my arm. I slipped his phone back onto the table. It looked like it had never been touched. Terrence dragged me away from the table. "Come on, Dad." "Jesus, look what you did." He shoved me down the hallway. He pushed me into the guest room and slammed the door. "Stay in here," he shouted. "Do not come out. Do not make a sound." I heard the lock click from the outside. He had locked me in. I sat on the bed. My heart was racing, but not from fear, from adrenaline. I listened to the sounds of the dinner party disintegrating. "I cannot believe this." Paige was sobbing. "Mr. Sterling, I am so sorry." "Forget the sofa," Sterling barked. "Look at my suit. This is a $3,000 suit. You told me he was manageable, Paige. You told me he was a vegetable. He just destroyed your living room. He is, Paige stammered. "It was an accident." "It was incompetence," Sterling countered. "If you cannot handle one old man, how are you going to handle a multi-million-dollar development project? Fix this, Paige. Get the house, get the deed, or do not bother coming in on Monday." I heard the front door slam. Sterling was gone. Then the screaming started. Paige screaming at Terrence, Terrence screaming back, the sound of glass breaking. I lay back on the pillow. I reached into my pocket and felt the cool metal of the USB drive. I had the clone. I had his messages. I had his contacts. And I had ruined her sofa. A small smile touched my lips. Beatrice would have scolded me for wasting good wine. But she would have loved the stain. I closed my eyes. They thought I was locked away. They thought I was punished. They didn't know I was just waiting for the data to upload to Harper's secure server. Tomorrow I would find out exactly how much my son owed and who he owed it to. Tomorrow the hunter would become the hunted. The dinner was a disaster. But the war was going exactly according to plan. Saturday morning broke with the tension of a violin string pulled to the snapping point. The house was quiet, but it was the silence of a battlefield before the first shot is fired. Paige was locked in her bedroom, likely nursing a hangover and a bruised ego after the wine disaster. Terrence was nowhere to be seen. He was probably hiding from me, or perhaps hiding from the loan sharks that were undoubtedly blowing up his phone. I sat on the edge of the guest bed, dressed in my own clothes again. I had reclaimed my trousers and a clean shirt while they were arguing late last night. I checked my watch. It was 9 o'clock. I had a meeting. I did not use the front door this time. I used the window. It was a ground floor room and the latch was old. Beatrice always said I could fix anything, but sometimes I liked things a little broken. A broken latch was a freedom door. I slid the window up, popped the screen out, and climbed over the sill into the azalea bushes. I walked 3 blocks to the corner store and called a cab. I gave the driver an address that Paige would never visit in a million years. Big Mama's Soul Food on 10th Street. When I walked into the diner, the smell hit me like a warm hug. Fried catfish, collard greens simmering with ham hocks, and cornbread baking in cast-iron skillets. It smelled like Sunday dinner. It smelled like Beatrice. This was one of the businesses she had saved. She held the note on their industrial freezer. I walked to the back booth, the one with the red vinyl seats that were cracked with age. A man was already waiting for me. Harper Vance looked like a man who owned the room. He was 35 years old, black, and dressed in a navy suit that was tailored to perfection. He had a tablet open in front of him and a plate of yams to his side. When he saw me, he stood up immediately. His face was a mask of respect and sorrow. "Mr. Bell," he said, offering his hand. I shook it. "Harper, you look good, son. Beatrice was proud of you." Harper's eyes tightened slightly. "She paid for my law school tuition, Mr. Bell. I would be working in a warehouse if not for her. I owe her everything. And now I owe you." We sat down. A waitress poured me coffee without asking. She knew me. She knew Beatrice. Harper tapped his tablet. "I received the data dump from the USB drive last night. My team has been analyzing it for 6 hours. It is ugly, Desmond. It is very ugly." "Tell me," I said, taking a sip of the bitter black coffee. Harper swiped a finger across the screen. "Your son Terrence owes $212,000 to a syndicate run by a man named Rocco Scarpetti. This is not a bank debt. This is street debt. The interest compounds daily. They have threatened him with physical violence twice in the last week. That is why he is desperate. That is why he needs the house sale. He is terrified." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. My son was not just a gambler. He was a fool who had gotten in bed with wolves. "And Paige?" I asked. Harper smiled, but it was a shark smile. It was cold and sharp. "Paige is worse," he said. "She does not owe money to gangsters. She owes money to corporate sharks." I dug into the employment contract she has with Apex Realty. I found something interesting. Something she probably did not tell Terrence. He turned the tablet so I could see it. It was a legal document dense with text. Harper pointed to a paragraph highlighted in yellow. "This is an underwriting guarantee clause," Harper explained. "Paige is not just a sourcing agent. She is a speculative buyer. To get her promotion to regional director, she signed a contract guaranteeing the acquisition of the Keystone lot. That is your house, Desmond. She guaranteed it." "What does that mean?" I asked, leaning in. "It means she put up her own collateral," Harper said. "She signed a promissory note. If she fails to deliver the deed to your property by the end of this month, she is personally liable for the projected lost revenue of the development start date." I stared at him. "How much?" $500,000, Harper said. The number hung in the air. $500,000. If she didn't get my house, she didn't just lose a commission. She lost $500,000. She would be bankrupt. She would lose her car, her clothes, her status. She would be ruined. "She bet on my death," I whispered. "She was so sure I would die or be committed that she bet her entire life on it." "Exactly," Harper said. "She leveraged herself to the hilt because she thought you were a soft target. She thought you were just a senile old man who would sign whatever she put in front of him." He leaned back, crossing his arms. "So here is the strategy, Desmond. We can stop the sale easily. The trust Beatrice set up is ironclad. You are the trustee. You own the property. Paige cannot sell it without your signature, and since you are competent, her power of attorney play will fail in court, especially with the evidence we have. We can save the house today." I looked at the coffee in my cup. I looked at the steam rising from it, but Harper continued, his voice dropping lower. "If we stop the sale today, she just gets fired. She walks away. She might sue you for emotional distress or some other frivolous thing. She survives." I looked up at him. "I don't want her to survive," I said. "Not financially, not after she spit on Beatrice's grave, not after she tried to erase my wife's legacy." Harper nodded slowly. "Then we have a different option. We do not stop the sale yet. We let her think she has won. We let her go to the closing table. We let the clock run down." "Explain," I said. "The deadline for her contract is next Friday," Harper said. If she does not have the title by 5 p.m. on Friday, the penalty clause activates. She owes Apex $500,000 immediately. They will garnish her wages. They will seize her assets. They will destroy her credit. She will never work in real estate again. So we wait, I asked. We wait. Harper confirmed. We let her file for guardianship. We let her bring the doctors. We let her drag you into court. And at the very last second, when she thinks the gavel is about to fall, we drop the hammer. We reveal the trust. We reveal the fraud. We reveal everything. The judge throws out the case. The sale collapses. The deadline passes. And Paige is destroyed. It was a cruel plan. It was a dangerous plan. It required me to endure another week of abuse. It required me to let them humiliate me in front of a judge. But then I remembered the for sale sign in the trunk. I remembered the steaks while I ate a cold burger. I remembered her laughing about bulldozing my garden. I looked at Harper. He was waiting. He was ready to fight. "Do it," I said. Harper grinned. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small device. It looked like a hearing aid. "Wear this," he said. "It is a high-fidelity recorder. It uploads to the cloud in real time. I want every conversation, every threat, every insult. If she bribes a doctor, I want it on tape. If Terrence begs for money, I want it on tape. We are building a coffin, Desmond, and we need every nail." I took the device. It was small and discreet. I put it in my ear. "Can you hear me?" Harper asked softly. "Loud and clear," I replied. "Good. Now there is one more thing. The doctor. Paige has hired a Dr. Eris Thorne to evaluate you tomorrow. Thorne is a hired gun. He has had 3 malpractice suits for false diagnoses in competency hearings. He takes bribes." I felt a surge of anger. They were bringing in a crooked doctor to call me crazy in my own home. "Let him come," I said. "I will be ready." "You have to fail the test," Desmond, Harper warned. "You have to convince him you are gone. But you have to do it in a way that proves he is a fraud later. When he asks you questions, give him answers that sound crazy but are actually specific references to things he cannot know." Like what I asked. Harper pulled up a file on his tablet. "Thorne has a mistress. Her name is Lola. He bought her a Mercedes last week using company funds." I smiled. It was a cold, hard smile. "I think I can work with that," I said. We finished our breakfast. I ate the catfish and greens with a hunger I hadn't felt in days. It tasted like strength. It tasted like home. Harper paid the bill. "You head back now, Desmond," he said. "Stay in character. Do not break. They are going to get desperate as the deadline approaches. They might get mean." "Let them," I said, standing up. "I am an electrician, Harper. I know how to handle high voltage. They are going to touch the wire and they are going to get burned." I walked out of the diner and back into the sunlight. The city felt different now. It wasn't a place that was pushing me out. It was a place I was defending. I caught the cab back to the suburbs. I climbed back through the window into the guest room. I lay on the bed and waited. I heard the front door open. It was Paige. She was screaming for Terrence. "Where is he?" she shrieked. "The window is open." He escaped again. I stayed silent. I waited until her footsteps were right outside the door. Then I started singing. I sang an old gospel song Beatrice loved. "His eye is on the sparrow." The door burst open. Paige stood there, her face twisted in fury. "Where did you go?" she demanded, marching over to the bed. I looked at her with wide, innocent eyes. "I went to see the birds," I said. "The sparrows. They are watching you, Paige. They see everything." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. "You are insane," she hissed. "You are completely insane." "Yes," I agreed, smiling vacantly. "But the birds know. The birds know about the $500,000. Paige froze. Her face went white. "What did you say?" she whispered. I just hummed the melody again, closing my eyes. She stared at me for a long moment, terror warring with disbelief. Then she spun around and ran out of the room. I heard her on the phone in the hallway. "Dr. Thorne, come tomorrow," she was shouting. "Early. We need this done now. He is talking nonsense, but he knows things. We need him sedated." I touched the small device in my ear. "Got you," I whispered. The trap was primed. The bait was taken. Tomorrow the doctor would come, and tomorrow I would put on the performance of a lifetime. Sunday morning dawned with the heavy stillness of a courtroom before the verdict. I was awake long before the sun, sitting in the chair by the window, watching a squirrel navigate the power lines. I felt a kinship with that squirrel. We were both walking a high wire without a net. Today was the day Dr. Eris Thorne would come to certify my incompetence. Today was the day I would lose my legal rights in the eyes of the state if I failed to execute my plan perfectly. Paige knocked on the door at 8 sharp. She didn't wait for an answer. She bustled in carrying a tray with oatmeal and orange juice. Her face was set in a mask of grim determination. "Eat up, Desmond," she said briskly, setting the tray on the nightstand. "The doctor will be here in an hour. You need your strength." I looked at the oatmeal. It was lumpy and cold. "Is it the doctor for the birds?" I asked, tilting my head. Paige flinched. "No, Desmond. It is a specialist. He is going to help you with your memory." I stirred the oatmeal. "I remember she is called Lola," I said softly. Paige froze. "Who is Lola?" I just smiled and hummed the gospel tune again. Paige stared at me for a long moment, her eyes narrowing. She was scared. She knew I knew something, but she couldn't figure out how. It was driving her mad. "Get dressed," she snapped. "Wear the pajamas. You look more comfortable in pajamas." She meant I looked more invalid. I obeyed. I put on the faded blue pajamas with the missing drawstring. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands resting on my knees, waiting. At 9 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I heard the murmur of voices in the hallway. Then the door opened, and a man walked in, followed closely by Paige and a sheepish-looking Terrence. Dr. Eris Thorne was a small man with a nervous energy that made him twitch. He wore a white coat that was too big for him and carried a clipboard like a shield. His eyes darted around the room, never landing on anything for more than a second. "Good morning, Mr. Bell," he said, his voice oily. "I am Dr. Thorne. I am here to have a little chat." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. I looked at the expensive gold watch on his wrist. "Hello," I said. "Are you the one with the Mercedes?" Thorne blinked, surprised. "Excuse me." "The Mercedes," I repeated. "The silver one, for the lady friend." Thorne's face went pale. He glanced quickly at Paige. "What is he talking about?" Paige stepped forward, her hand gripping Thorne's shoulder. "He is confused, doctor. He rambles. He mixes up reality with television shows. Please just proceed with the evaluation." Thorne cleared his throat, regaining his composure. "Right. Of course. Dementia often manifests as confabulation." He pulled a chair up close to me. He clicked his pen. "Now, Mr. Bell, I am going to ask you a few simple questions. Just answer as best you can." I nodded eagerly. "Like a test. I liked tests in school. Beatrice helped me study." Thorne smiled thinly. "Yes, like a test. First question. What year is it?" I scrunched up my face, pretending to think hard. "It is the year of the flood," I said. "The year the water took the basement." Thorne scribbled on his clipboard. "Disoriented to time." Next question. "Who is the President of the United States?" I leaned in, whispering. "It is the man on the television, the one with the loud voice." "He told me to buy gold." Thorne nodded, scribbling faster, unable to identify current leadership. Paranoia. He looked at Paige. "This is a classic presentation. Advanced cognitive decline." Paige nodded vigorously. "See? I told you. He is dangerous to himself." Thorne turned back to me. "One last thing, Mr. Bell. Can you count backwards from 10 for me?" I smiled. 10, 9, 500,000, 0. Thorne stopped writing. He looked at me. "What did you say?" 500,000. I repeated, my voice clear and steady. "That is a big number, doctor. A very big number to lose on a Friday." Paige gasped. She stepped back, hitting the dresser. Thorne looked from me to Paige. "What is going on here? Why is he saying these numbers?" I leaned forward. My eyes locked onto Thorne's. "Is Lola happy with the car, doctor?" I asked, dropping the act for a split second. "Does she know about the other accounts? The ones in the Cayman Islands?" Thorne dropped his pen. It clattered on the hardwood floor. He stood up, knocking his chair back. "This man is not senile," he stammered. He is threatening me." "He is crazy," Dr. Page shouted, stepping between us. "He is just repeating things he heard on the news. He doesn't know what he is saying. Just sign the papers. Sign them now." Thorne looked at me. I stared back, my expression placid again. I like the news, I said innocently. The news talks about ethics. Do you have ethics, doctor? Or did you sell them for a watch? Thorne was shaking. He looked at Paige. I cannot do this. He knows too much. You have to, Paige hissed. I paid you. You took the money, heiress. You are in this. If you walk out that door without signing, I will tell everyone about your little malpractice settlement last year. Thorne froze. He was trapped. Trapped between a crazy old man who knew his secrets and a desperate woman who owned his past. He picked up his pen. His hand was trembling so hard he could barely hold it. Fine, he muttered. He is incompetent. Severe dementia with paranoid delusions. Immediate institutionalization is recommended. He scribbled his signature on the bottom of the form. He tore the page off the clipboard and thrust it at Paige. There, take it. I am leaving. He turned and bolted for the door. Paige grabbed the paper, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. She looked at me. You lose Desmond, she whispered. You are officially crazy. She turned to follow the doctor. Wait, I called out. She stopped, looking back impatiently. What? Don't forget the envelope, I said, pointing to the door. What envelope? The one you gave him, I said. The fat one, in the hallway, by the umbrella stand. Paige's eyes went wide. She ran out of the room. I stood up. I walked to the door and peered into the hallway. Thorne was at the front door trying to open it. Paige caught up to him. She reached into her purse and pulled out a thick white envelope. Here, she hissed, shoving it into his pocket. Take it, and keep your mouth shut. Thorne nodded, sweating profusely. He opened the door and practically ran to his car. Paige slammed the door. She leaned against it, breathing hard. She clutched the signed medical form to her chest like a winning lottery ticket. I stepped back into the room and sat on the bed. I reached up and touched the small device in my ear. Did you get that? Harper, I whispered. Harper's voice came back clear and sharp. Every word, Desmond. We have the threat. We have the coercion. And we have the sound of the bribe. It is over. I smiled. It wasn't over. Not yet. Paige walked back into the room. She was glowing with victory. Pack your bags, Desmond, she said. We are going to court tomorrow morning. The judge will sign the order by noon. You will be in your new home by dinner. She didn't know that my new home was going to be right where it always was. She didn't know that her new home was going to be a cell. I looked at her. I didn't see a monster anymore. I saw a fool, a greedy, arrogant fool who had just signed her own confession. Okay, Paige, I said meekly. I will pack. She smirked and left, closing the door. I waited until her footsteps faded. Then I pulled out the small notebook from under the mattress. I turned to a blank page. Sunday. The doctor signed. The bribe was paid. The trap is sprung. I closed the book. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow was Judgment Day. But tonight I had one more visitor to deal with. My son. I knew he would come. Fear makes people do stupid things. And Terrence was terrified. I lay down and closed my eyes. Let him come. I had a question for him. A question that would decide his fate. The sun set, casting long shadows across the room. The house grew quiet. I waited in the dark. A sentinel. A father. A judge. The final act was about to begin. The rain against the bedroom window sounded like gravel being thrown by an angry hand. It was 2 a.m. on Sunday night. The darkness in the room was absolute, save for the thin line of street lamp light slicing through the gap in the curtains. I lay on the bed fully dressed under the covers, my breathing shallow and even. I was mimicking the sleep of the medicated, the sleep of the senile, but my mind was as sharp as a razor wire. I was waiting. I knew he would come. I had seen the way Terrence looked at dinner. I had seen the way his hand shook when he held his fork. I had seen the terror in his eyes every time his phone vibrated. He was a man running out of road, and when a man runs out of road, he does desperate things. The doorknob turned. It was a slow, agonizing sound. The latch clicked. A shadow spilled into the room. I kept my eyes closed. I relaxed my jaw. I let out a soft, snoring breath. Footsteps approached the bed. They were heavy and clumsy. The floorboards groaned. I smelled him before I felt him. He smelled of stale bourbon and cold sweat. It was the scent of fear. The mattress dipped as he sat on the edge of the bed. I felt the heat of his body. I heard a sound that broke my heart. He was crying. It was a wet, stifled sobbing, the sound of a child trying not to wake his parents after a nightmare. "Dad," he whispered. His voice was thick with tears. "Dad, I am so sorry." I almost opened my eyes. I almost sat up and wrapped my arms around him. I almost told him it would be okay, that I could fix it, that I had the money to make the monsters go away. That was my instinct. That was the father in me, the man who had held him when he scraped his knee, who had taught him to throw a baseball, who had signed the adoption papers with a shaking hand and a heart full of hope 30 years ago. But I stayed still. I had to know. I had to see how far he would go. I felt something cool and smooth slide into my hand. A pen. He was wrapping my fingers around a pen. Then I felt paper. He was placing a document on the nightstand and guiding my hand toward it. "Just sign it, Dad," he whispered. "Just sign it, and it will all be over. You won't know the difference. You will be safe. And I will be safe. Please, Dad, just do this for me. One last time." He was trying to steal my signature. He was trying to forge my consent while I slept. He was trying to sell my home, my life, and my dignity to save his own skin. I waited until the tip of the pen touched the paper. Then I opened my eyes. The room was dark, but I could see him. I could see the sweat on his forehead. I could see the pen in his hand guiding mine. I tightened my grip on the pen. I didn't sign. I held it fast. Terrence froze. He looked down at me. His eyes went wide with shock. He tried to pull his hand away, but I held on. I had worked with my hands for 40 years. My grip was iron. I sat up slowly. I did not let go of the pen. I stared into his eyes. I did not scream. I did not shout. My voice was a low rumble, a sound that came from the bottom of a deep well. "How much?" I asked. Terrence stammered. "What?" "Dad, you are awake. I cut him off. "I asked you a question, Terrence. How much? What is the price tag? What is the number that makes a son sell his father while he sleeps?" Terrence pulled his hand back, scrambling off the bed. He dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor. It was the power of attorney form. "Dad, it is not like that," he cried. "You do not understand. They are going to kill me." "Who?" I asked. "Rocco Scarpetti," he sobbed. "I owe him. I owe him $200,000, Dad. He called me tonight. He said if I do not have the money by tomorrow noon, he is going to start taking pieces of me. He said he will cut off my fingers." He held up his hands, shaking them in front of my face. "I am scared, Dad. I am so scared." I did not know what else to do. Paige said this was the only way. She said if we sell the house, we can pay him off. We can start over. I looked at him. I looked at the man I had raised. He was 32 years old, but in that moment he looked like a toddler who had broken a vase and blamed the cat. "So you decided to break me instead," I said. "You decided to put me in a home. You decided to let your wife call me crazy. You decided to steal the roof over my head." "I had no choice," he shouted. His voice rose, cracking with hysteria. "What did you want me to do? Die? Did you want me to die, Dad? I wanted you to come to me," I said. "I wanted you to be a man. I wanted you to tell me the truth. Tell you the truth." He laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "Tell you what? That I am a failure, that I lost my job, that I gambled away everything. And what would you have done, Dad? You would have given me a lecture. You would have told me about hard work. You would have told me about saving pennies in a jar." He paced the room, his hands pulling at his hair. "You and Mom," he spat. "You were always so perfect, so humble, living in that small house, driving those old cars. You acted like being poor was a virtue. You acted like struggle was noble. Well, I hated it. I hated every second of it. I hated wearing secondhand clothes. I hated not having what the other kids had. I listened. I felt the words hitting me like stones. "We gave you everything we had," I said softly. "We gave you love. We gave you a home. We paid for your college. You gave me mediocrity," he screamed. "You taught me to be small. You taught me to be afraid of success. That is why I gambled, Dad, because I wanted to be big. I wanted to be someone. I wanted to have what Paige has. I wanted to win." He stopped pacing. He looked at me with a look of pure resentment. "And now you are sitting there judging me," he said. "You are sitting there with your judgment and your disappointment. You have no idea what it is like to be drowning. You have no idea what it is like to need money so bad you can taste it." I stood up. I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain. I thought about the box in the bank vault. I thought about the $15 million in assets. I thought about the trust fund Beatrice had set up for him. A trust fund that was supposed to unlock when he turned 35 or when he showed maturity. He was right. I didn't know what it was like to need money for gambling, but I knew what it was like to starve so my son could eat. I knew what it was like to work double shifts so he could have new shoes. I turned back to him. "You are right, Terrence," I said. "I failed you." Terrence looked surprised. He blinked. "I failed you because I protected you," I continued. "I failed you because I thought love was enough. I thought if I showed you how to be a good man, you would become one. But you did not want to be a good man. You wanted to be a rich man." I walked over to the door. I opened it. "Get out," I said. Terrence stared at me. "What?" "Get out of my room," I said. "Go to your wife. Go to your loan shark. Go to your destiny. But do not come back in here." "Dad, please," he begged, falling to his knees. "You have to sign. If you do not sign, they will hurt me. You have to save me." I looked down at him. I saw the adoption papers in my mind. I saw the day we brought him home. I saw Beatrice holding him, crying with joy. That boy was gone. This thing in front of me was a stranger. "I cannot save you, Terrence," I said, "because you do not want to be saved. You want to be bailed out, and there is a difference." I stepped back. "But Dad," he cried, reaching for my leg. I kicked his hand away. It was a reflex, a rejection. "No," I said. I slammed the door in his face. I turned the lock. I heard him pounding on the wood. I heard him screaming. I heard him crying. Dad opened the door. "Dad, please." I walked to the bed and sat down. I did not open the door. I listened to his sobs turn into curses. I listened to him kick the door one last time before retreating down the hall. I sat in the dark. My heart was a stone in my chest. It was heavy and cold and dead. I had lost my wife on Tuesday. And tonight, on a rainy Sunday, I had lost my son. He had blamed his poverty. He had blamed us. He had rejected the very foundation of our lives. He didn't know that we were never poor. He didn't know that we were kings in disguise. And because he could not see past the surface, he would never inherit the kingdom. I reached for the notebook under the mattress. I held it tight. Tomorrow was Monday. Tomorrow was the court hearing. Terrence had made his choice. He chose the lie. Tomorrow I would tell the truth. And the truth was going to set me free, but it was going to bury him. I lay back down. I did not sleep. I watched the shadows lengthen and shorten as the cars passed by outside. I was ready. The grief was gone. Only the cold, hard resolve remained. The judge was waiting, and I had a story to tell. Monday morning arrived with the sterile coldness of a hospital waiting room, but it was the Fulton County Family Court. The air smelled of floor wax and desperation. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands folded in my lap, staring at the wood grain. I wore my old cardigan, the one with the frayed cuffs. I looked small. I looked diminished. I looked exactly like the man my daughter-in-law Paige had described in her petition, a man who could no longer be trusted with his own life. Paige sat at the plaintiff's table to my left. She was dressed in a modest navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore no jewelry. She was playing the role of the concerned, burden-carrying relative to perfection. Beside her sat her lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who wore a suit that cost more than my first car. He was shuffling papers, looking bored and confident. Terrence sat in the gallery directly behind them. He was hunched over his elbows on his knees, his head in his hands. He looked like a man waiting for the executioner's axe. He knew what he had done in my bedroom the night before. He knew he had crossed a line from which there was no return. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. We stood. Judge Sylvia Holloway swept into the room. She was a formidable woman with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She took her seat and surveyed the room. Her gaze lingered on me for a moment before turning to Paige's lawyer. In the matter of the guardianship of Desmond Bell, she read from the docket. "Counsel, you may proceed." Mr. Sterling stood up, buttoning his jacket. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today because Mr. Desmond Bell is suffering from rapid and severe cognitive decline. He has become a danger to himself and others. He has exhibited paranoid delusions, violent outbursts, and an inability to perform basic hygiene tasks. His family loves him dearly and simply wants to ensure he is in a safe facility where he can receive the 24-hour care he requires." He gestured to Paige. "Mrs. Paige Bell has been his primary caregiver since the sudden death of his wife last week. She has witnessed this decline firsthand." Judge Holloway nodded. "Call your witness." Paige took the stand. She swore to tell the truth. The irony was thick enough to choke on. Mrs. Bell, tell the court what you have observed, Sterling asked gently. Page sniffed, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. It has been heartbreaking, Your Honor. He forgets where he is. He leaves the water running for hours, flooding the bathroom. He destroyed my living room in a fit of rage on Friday night, throwing a wine bottle because he thought it was ketchup. He wanders out of the house at night. He talks to birds. He thinks the birds are spies. She looked at me with a face full of practiced pity. We just want him safe. We found a wonderful facility upstate. It is within our budget. We are willing to sell his house to pay for his care. We just want Dad to have peace. The judge looked at me. She saw an old man staring at the ceiling, humming softly. I was giving Paige exactly what she wanted. I was giving her the crazy old man. Mr. Sterling presented Dr. Thorne's affidavit. Your Honor, we have a signed evaluation from Dr. Eris Thorne, a respected specialist. He confirms a diagnosis of advanced dementia with paranoid features. He recommends immediate institutionalization. Judge Holloway took the paper. She read it. She frowned. This seems conclusive, she said. She turned to me. Mr. Bell, do you have anything to say? Do you understand why you are here? I looked at the judge. I blinked slowly. I like the birds. I said, my voice trembling. The birds know about the money. Paige let out a sob. See, Your Honor, he is gone. Judge Holloway sighed. She picked up her gavel. It seems clear that Mr. Bell lacks the capacity to manage his own affairs. I am inclined to grant the emergency guardianship to Mrs. Paige Bell. She raised the gavel. Objection. The voice boomed from the back of the courtroom. It was deep, resonant, and filled with authority. Every head turned. Harper Vance was standing in the doorway. He was not wearing a suit today. He was wearing the armor of war. A charcoal gray three-piece suit, a silk tie, and a look of cold fury. He walked down the center aisle, his briefcase swinging by his side. Who are you, Judge? Holloway demanded, lowering the gavel but not striking it. I am Harper Vance, attorney at law, Harper said, stopping at the gate. And I represent Mr. Desmond Bell. I am entering my appearance as defense counsel, and I have a motion to dismiss based on fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. Paige stood up. Who is this? We didn't hire him. Desmond doesn't have a lawyer. He doesn't even know what a lawyer is. Sit down, Mrs. Bell, the judge snapped. Mr. Vance approached the bench. Harper walked through the gate. He came to my table. He put a hand on my shoulder. Hello, Desmond, he said softly, ready to drop the hammer. I looked up at him. The fog cleared from my eyes. I sat up straight. I buttoned my cardigan. I am ready, Harper, I said, my voice clear and strong. Paige gasped. Terrence made a choking sound in the gallery. Mr. Sterling looked confused. Your Honor, this man is clearly not retained by the defendant. The defendant is incompetent. That is the subject of this hearing, Mr. Sterling, the judge said. Mr. Vance, you made some serious allegations. Fraud. Bribery. Do you have proof? I do, Your Honor, Harper said. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked it open. I have 3 exhibits, Your Honor. Exhibit A is a high-fidelity audio recording taken yesterday morning in Mr. Bell's bedroom. He pulled out a small speaker and connected it to his tablet. He pressed play. The courtroom filled with the sound of Dr. Thorne's nervous voice. He is threatening me. Then Paige's voice, sharp and vicious. You have to. I paid you. You took the money, Eris. If you walk out that door without signing, I will tell everyone about your malpractice settlement. Then the sound of paper tearing, and finally Paige's voice again. Here, take it, and keep your mouth shut. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Paige had turned white. She gripped the railing of the witness stand, her knuckles bloodless. Judge Holloway's face turned into stone. Is that your voice, Mrs. Bell? The judge asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Paige stammered. That is doctored. It is a fake. Deep fake. AI. Harper didn't even look at her. Exhibit B, Your Honor. A recording from Friday night, the night of the alleged violent outburst. He pressed play again. Mr. Sterling's voice boomed. Look at my suit. This is a $3,000 suit. Then Paige. Fix this page. Get the house. Get the deed. Or do not bother coming in on Monday. And then later Paige screaming at Terrence. We control the narrative, Terrence. He is crazy if we say he is crazy. Harper paused the recording. This proves malice, Your Honor, Harper stated. It proves a conspiracy to manufacture a diagnosis for financial gain. But why? Why would a daughter-in-law go to such lengths? He pulled out a document. Exhibit C, Your Honor. This is an employment contract between Paige Bell and Apex Realty. specifically the underwriting guarantee clause. Harper held up the paper. If Mrs. Bell fails to deliver the deed to Desmond Bell's property by this coming Friday at 5 p.m., she owes her employer $500,000 in penalties. She is not concerned for his health, Your Honor. She is concerned about her debt. She bet her career on my client's grave before he was even in it. Paige sank back into the witness chair. She looked like a balloon that had lost all its air. Terrence was weeping silently in the back row. Judge Holloway looked at the evidence. She looked at Paige. Then she looked at me. Mr. Bell. She said, her voice soft with respect. Are you competent? I stood up. I didn't need the table for support. I looked the judge in the eye. Your Honor, I said, I worked as a master electrician for 40 years. I raised that boy sitting in the back row. I cared for my wife until her last breath. I own $15 million in commercial real estate assets in this city, assets my wife acquired to protect our community. I am not crazy. I am just disappointed. I turned to look at Paige. I pretended to be confused because I wanted to see how far you would go, I said. I wanted to see if there was any love in you, any humanity. But there was only greed. Paige did not speak. She stared at the floor, trembling. Judge Holloway slammed her gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. Petition denied with prejudice, the judge roared. Mr. Vance, please turn all this evidence over to the district attorney's office immediately. She pointed the gavel at Paige. Mrs. Bell, you are to vacate the plaintiff's table. I am issuing an immediate restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mr. Bell or his assets, and I am recommending that the DA open an investigation into elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. She looked at Terrence. And you, sir, you sat there and let this happen to your father. Shame on you. The judge stood up. This court is adjourned. Bailiffs moved toward Paige. She stood up shakily. It was not supposed to be like this, she whispered. It was a sure thing. Harper packed up his briefcase. He looked at me and smiled. Let us go, Desmond, he said. We have a lot of work to do. We walked down the aisle. Terrence looked up as I passed. Dad, he choked out. Dad, please. I didn't stop. I didn't slow down. I walked past him like he was a stranger. We walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. But I wasn't done. I took out my phone. I dialed Etta at the bank. Etta, I said, activate Phase 2. What is Phase 2? Harper asked, raising an eyebrow. I looked at him. My eyes were dry. My heart was hard. Phase 2 is the foreclosure, I said. Beatrice owned the note on their luxury condo, too. She bought it 6 months ago when their bank was offloading bad debt. They haven't paid their mortgage in 3 months. Harper laughed, a genuine delighted laugh. You are going to evict them, he asked. I nodded. They tried to take my home, I said. Now I am going to take theirs. I walked toward Harper's car. The trial was over. The punishment was just beginning. The marble steps of the courthouse felt solid beneath my feet as I walked out into the afternoon sun. Harper walked beside me, his stride long and confident. Behind us, Paige and Terrence were stumbling out into the light, looking like survivors of a shipwreck. They were squinting against the brightness, dazed by the speed at which their lives had just unraveled. I stopped near the fountain in the plaza. I wanted to watch. I wanted to see the first domino fall. It did not take long. Paige's phone rang. It was a sharp, aggressive ringtone that cut through the city noise. She looked at the screen, and her face went from pale to ghostly white. She answered it, putting the phone to her ear with a trembling hand. Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice cracking, please let me explain. The judge was biased. We can appeal. I watched her face crumple. I could almost hear the shouting on the other end of the line. Sterling was a shark, and sharks do not tolerate failure. Paige flinched, holding the phone away from her ear as the volume rose. You are firing me, she shrieked. You cannot fire me. I have rights. She listened for another moment, and then her knees gave out. She literally sank onto the concrete steps, her expensive skirt bunching around her legs. $500,000, she whispered. I do not have $500,000. Please, sir. That clause was just a formality. You cannot enforce it. She listened again. Then the line went dead. She stared at the phone as if it were a bomb that had just detonated in her hand. She looked up and saw me standing there. Her eyes were black holes of terror. He activated the clause, she screamed at me. He is suing me for the full amount. He is freezing my accounts. He is taking my commission. He is destroying me. I looked at her. I adjusted my cuffs. You signed the contract, Paige? I said, my voice carrying over the distance. You bet against the wrong man. She buried her face in her hands and began to sob. It was a loud, ugly sound. Passers-by stared. Terrence tried to touch her shoulder, but she slapped his hand away. Do not touch me, she hissed. This is your fault. This is all your fault. I turned to Harper. What about Terrence? I asked. Harper checked his watch. Right about now. My son had managed to secure a low-level job selling used cars 2 weeks ago. He hadn't told me. He hadn't told Paige. He was trying to scrape together enough cash to keep Rocco at bay. But secrets have a way of coming out, especially when you are being watched. Harper held up his tablet. He had tapped into the security feed of the dealership. It was a public feed used for marketing, but Harper knew how to access the audio. I watched the screen. Terrence was standing in the lot talking to a customer about a sedan. 2 black SUVs pulled up to the curb. 4 men got out. They were big men. They wore leather jackets despite the heat. They walked straight up to Terrence. They didn't hit him. They didn't have to. They surrounded him. One of them, a man with a scar running down his cheek, put a heavy hand on Terrence's shoulder. Time is up, Terry, the man said. His voice was tinny through the tablet speakers, but the menace was clear. Rocco is tired of waiting. Terrence looked like he was going to vomit. Please, he begged. I need more time. The house sale fell through. Just give me a week. The man laughed. You do not have a week. You have 24 hours. Or we start taking tows. And we are going to do it right here in front of your customers. The manager of the dealership came running out. He was a red-faced man waving his arms. What is going on here? He shouted. Get off my lot. You are scaring the customers. The scarred man looked at the manager. We are just collecting a debt, he said calmly. Your employee here is a thief. He gambles with money that isn't his. The manager turned to Terrence. Is this true? He demanded. Are you bringing loan sharks to my place of business? Terrence stammered. I can explain. You are fired, the manager screamed. Get your things and get out. I do not want this trash here. Go. The feed cut out as Terrence ran toward his car, the 4 men laughing as he fled. Harper closed the tablet. He is unemployed, I said. And he is hunted. He has nowhere to go, Harper confirmed. He cannot go to Paige. She is broke. He cannot go to his friends. He owes them all money. I looked at the sky. It was a beautiful blue. Let us go home, I said. We drove back to the neighborhood. When we pulled up to my house, it looked sad. The windows were dark. The yard was cluttered with the debris the clean-out crew had left behind. The front door still had the scratches from when I broke in, but it was mine. It was safe. I unlocked the door. The air inside was stale. The furniture was gone. The walls were bare. But the bones of the house were strong. Beatrice always said this house had good bones. I picked up the phone. I called Mr. Henderson. Desmond, he answered on the first ring. We heard what happened. Are you okay? I am better than okay, I said. I am rebuilding. I need a crew, Mr. Henderson. I need painters. I need carpenters. I need landscapers. And I want to hire from the neighborhood. I want to hire the people Beatrice helped. Say no more, Desmond. Mr. Henderson said. We will be there in an hour. And they were. By 3 o'clock, my driveway was full of trucks. Mrs. Johnson brought a basket of muffins. The Carter brothers brought their tools. Young men and women I had watched grow up arrived with paintbrushes and ladders. We didn't just clean the house, we transformed it. We painted the exterior a bright, cheerful yellow. It was Beatrice's favorite color. She always wanted a yellow house, but we painted it gray because gray was practical. Gray didn't show the dirt. Today I didn't care about practical. I cared about joy. We planted marigolds along the walkway. We fixed the loose step on the porch. We polished the hardwood floors until they gleamed like honey. I stood in the center of the living room watching my neighbors work. They laughed. They sang. They told stories about Mrs. Bell, the teacher who bought them shoes when their parents couldn't. This was wealth. This was the capital my wife had accrued. Not just the land, but the loyalty. By sunset, the house was glowing. It looked like a beacon in the twilight. I sat on the front porch in my rocking chair. The air smelled of wet paint and blooming flowers. A car drove by slowly. It was a beat-up sedan. I saw a face in the window. It was Terrence. He looked at the house. He looked at the yellow paint. He looked at the flowers. He looked at me sitting there like a king on his throne. His face was a mask of misery. He looked hungry. He looked terrified. He slowed down as if he were going to stop, as if he were going to come up the walk and beg for sanctuary. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just watched him. I picked up my glass of iced tea and took a sip. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't anger anymore. It was indifference. He sped up and drove away, disappearing into the darkness. I felt a pang of sorrow deep in my chest. No father wants to see his son suffer. But I knew that if I opened that door now, if I let him back in, I would be signing my own death warrant. He hadn't learned yet. Earned. He was only sorry because he was caught. He was only scared because he was broke. I took out the notebook. I turned to a new page. Monday. The house is yellow. The wolves are at the door, but they cannot get in. I closed the book. The first phase was complete. I had my home back. I had my freedom. But Paige and Terrence were still out there. They were desperate. And desperate people find places to hide. They thought they could retreat to their luxury condo downtown. They thought they still had a roof over their heads even if the walls were closing in. They didn't know about phase 2. They didn't know that the bank Beatrice bought into held the note on their condo. They didn't know that they were 3 months behind on their mortgage because Terrence had been gambling with the payments. I reached for my phone. I dialed Etta. "Is the paperwork ready?" I asked. "It is ready, Desmond." Etta said, her voice crisp. "The foreclosure notice is printed. The sheriff is scheduled for tomorrow morning." "Good," I said. I looked out at the street. The streetlights flickered on, illuminating the new yellow paint. They wanted to put me out on the street. They wanted me homeless. Tomorrow they would find out exactly how cold the pavement feels. I rocked back and forth in my chair. "Sleep well, son," I whispered to the empty street. "Sleep well, Paige, because tomorrow you are going to wake up in a nightmare." Tuesday morning arrived with the sterile silence of a bank vault. I sat across from Etta in her office at Community First Bank. On the mahogany desk between us sat a single file folder. It was thick. It was heavy. It was labeled the Meridian Condominiums Unit 42B. This was the home my son Terrence and his wife Paige had flaunted for 3 years. It was a glass box in the sky with marble floors and a view of the city skyline. They had invited us over exactly once for a housewarming party where they served champagne I could not pronounce and made Beatrice take off her shoes so she would not scuff the floors. They bragged about the price tag. They bragged about the exclusivity. They never mentioned that they were drowning. Etta opened the file. Her fingers traced the payment history. "They have not paid the mortgage since February," she said. 3 months, Desmond. 90 days of default. In the banking world, that is the red zone. Beatrice bought the note on this property 6 months ago. The original lender was offloading high-risk assets and your wife snapped it up. She knew. I nodded slowly. Beatrice always knew. She watched them spending money they did not have, driving cars they leased and wearing clothes they put on credit. She knew the crash was coming. She bought the debt so she could be the safety net. She bought it so she could catch them when they fell, but Beatrice was gone. And the safety net was now a trap door. I looked at the signature line on the foreclosure authorization form. It required the signature of the trustee. That was me. If I sign this, I asked what happens. Etta looked at me over her glasses. "If you sign this, we execute the acceleration clause immediately. The loan is called in full. Since they cannot pay the entire balance of $400,000 plus penalties today, we move to immediate eviction. The sheriff is already on standby." Beatrice prepared for this contingency. She called it the tough love protocol. Tough love. It felt more like an execution. But then I remembered the way Paige had looked at me in the courtroom. I remembered Terrence trying to steal my signature in the dark. They had tried to evict me from my life. They had tried to erase me. I picked up the pen. The ink flowed smooth and black. I signed my name, Desmond Bell, trustee. "Let us go," I said, standing up. "I want to be there." We drove to the Meridian in Etta's sensible sedan. Harper met us in the lobby. He had the sheriff with him, a large man named Deputy Miller, who looked like he could move a mountain without breaking a sweat. We rode the elevator to the 42nd floor. The silence in the car was thick. My ears popped as we ascended. We were going up to their ivory tower to tear it down. We walked down the plush carpeted hallway to Unit 42B. I could hear shouting from inside. "It is your fault," Paige was screaming. Her voice was shrill, hysterical. "You told me you paid it. You told me the transfer went through. I did pay it, Terrence shouted back. I mean, I was going to. I just needed to double it first. I had a sure thing, Paige. A sure thing in the fifth race. You gambled the mortgage payment, Paige shrieked. You gambled our house. I looked at Harper. He nodded. Deputy Miller stepped forward and pounded on the door. It was a heavy, authoritarian knock that demanded attention. Sheriff's Department, open up. The shouting stopped instantly. There was a frantic scrambling sound, then silence. Open the door or we will breach it, Miller called out. The lock clicked. The door opened a crack. Paige peered out. She looked wrecked. Her hair was messy, her eyes swollen. She was wearing a silk robe that looked stained. What is it? She whispered. Deputy Miller pushed the door open. He stepped inside, filling the entryway. Eviction order, ma'am, he said, handing her the paper. This property has been foreclosed upon by the lien holder. You are trespassing. You have 15 minutes to vacate the premises. Paige stared at the paper. Her hands shook violently. Foreclosed, she stammered. No, that is impossible. We have a grace period. We have rights. Your grace period expired 30 days ago, Miller said impassively. The note holder has accelerated the loan. Unless you have $412,000 in cash right now, you have to leave. Paige turned to Terrence, who was cowering by the kitchen island. Fix this, she screamed. Do something. Terrence looked at the floor. I cannot, he whispered. I do not have it. Then I stepped into the apartment. I walked past the sheriff. I walked past Paige. I stood in the center of the living room looking at the view. It was a nice view. You could see my neighborhood from here, way off in the distance, a patch of green and brown against the gray city. Hello, son, I said. Terrence looked up. His face went gray. Dad, what are you doing here? Paige demanded, pulling her robe tighter. Did you come to gloat? Get out of my house. I turned to face her. It is not your house, Paige, I said calmly. It never was. You were just renting it from the bank. And today the landlord is calling in the rent. What are you talking about? She spat. We have a mortgage with City National. Not anymore, Harper said, stepping forward. He held up a document. City National sold your distressed mortgage 6 months ago. They sold it to a private holding company, the Beatrice Bell Community Trust. Paige's mouth fell open. She looked from Harper to me. Beatrice, she whispered. Your wife. My wife, I confirmed. She bought your debt, Paige. She knew you were in trouble. She wanted to protect you. She was going to let you stay here. She was going to help you restructure the payments. All you had to do was be decent. All you had to do was treat us like family. I stepped closer to her. But you didn't, I said, my voice hardening. You treated us like garbage. You treated us like a resource to be mined. So now the mine is closed. I looked at Terrence. You gambled the mortgage payments, son, I said. You took the money your mother worked for, the money we loaned you for the down payment years ago, and you gave it to bookies. Terrence started to cry. It was a pathetic sound. Dad, I am sorry. I can fix it. Just give me a loan. Just pay off the balance. You have millions now. I know you do. Just write a check. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had tried to steal my signature while I slept. No, I said. Sheriff, remove them. Deputy Miller moved forward. All right, folks, let us go. Grab your essentials. Anything else goes to the curb. Paige tried to run to the bedroom. My jewelry, she screamed. My furs. Miller grabbed her arm. Essentials, ma'am. Medications and documents. You can come back for the rest with a scheduled appointment. Right now you leave. He marched them toward the door. Terrence grabbed a pair of sneakers. Paige grabbed her purse. That was it. They were shoved out into the hallway. The door slammed shut behind them. I stood in the silence of the apartment. I looked around at the expensive furniture, the art on the walls, the status symbols they had accumulated. It was all dust. It was all fake. I walked out. We took the elevator down. When we got to the lobby, Paige and Terrence were arguing with the doorman. You cannot kick us out, Paige was yelling. We live here. I am sorry, Mrs. Bell, the doorman said, looking uncomfortable. The sheriff's order is clear. You are barred from the building. They were pushed out the revolving doors onto the sidewalk. It was raining again, a cold gray drizzle that soaked through clothes in seconds. I walked out after them. I stood under the awning, dry and safe. Paige and Terrence stood on the wet pavement. They looked like refugees. Paige's silk robe was clinging to her legs. Terrence was shivering in his t-shirt. People were walking by, staring. A woman with a poodle paused to watch. A businessman checked his watch and skirted around them. Paige turned on Terrence. She shoved him hard in the chest. "You useless loser," she screamed. "This is your fault. You gambled it all away. You lied to me. You told me the mortgage was paid." "I was trying to win it back," Terrence shouted back. "I was trying to win big for us, because you always need more, Paige. You always need the best. The car, the clothes, the trips. I couldn't keep up." "So you stole from your parents," she screeched. "You tried to commit your father. You are a criminal, Terrence, and a failure." She looked at me. She saw me standing there dry and calm. She ran toward me. "Desmond, please," she begged, clutching the lapels of my jacket. "I didn't know. He lied to me too. He forced me to do it. I am a victim here. Please let me back in. I have nowhere to go." I looked down at her hands, the hands that had thrown my wife's clothes into trash bags, the hands that had pointed a finger at me in court. I gently removed her hands from my jacket. "You have parents, Paige," I said. "Go to them. Maybe they will take you in." "My parents hate failure," she whispered. "They will laugh at me." "Then you will learn humility," I said. "It is a lesson you are overdue for." I turned to Terrence. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at a black car parked across the street, a car with tinted windows. He knew who was in that car. Rocco. Terrence looked at me one last time. His eyes were dead. "Goodbye, Dad," he said softly. He turned and started walking down the street away from the building, away from Paige, away from me. He walked toward the darkness. Paige watched him go. Then she looked at me. "You are a monster," she hissed. "You destroyed your own family." "I didn't destroy it, Paige," I said. "I just stopped paying for the illusion." I turned and walked back into the building. I had a meeting with the building manager. I had to list the unit for rent. Beatrice would want the income to go to the community fund. I didn't look back at the sidewalk. I didn't watch Paige crying in the rain. The tower had fallen. The false idols were smashed. I was done with them. But I wasn't done with the world. I still had work to do. I still had a legacy to build. And as I rode the elevator back up to the empty apartment, I felt lighter than I had in years. The purge was complete. Now it was time to rebuild. Wednesday night brought a storm that rattled the newly installed windows of my yellow house. It was a torrential Georgia downpour, the kind that turns red clay into slick mud and makes the gutters sing. I sat in my armchair in the living room, listening to the rhythm of the rain. The house smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil. It smelled of peace. I had a book open on my lap, but I was not reading. I was listening. I heard the sound of a car engine straining outside, followed by the slam of a door. Then footsteps heavy and wet running up the walkway. Then came the pounding. It was not a polite knock. It was the desperate hammering of fists against wood. "Dad, open up. Please, Dad, let us in." It was Terrence. His voice was muffled by the storm and the thick oak door, but the panic was clear. I stayed seated for a moment. I looked at the fireplace where a small fire was crackling. I looked at the photos of Beatrice on the mantel. She looked serene. She looked like she knew this moment was coming. The pounding continued. "Desmond, please. It is Paige. We are soaking wet. Open the door." I stood up slowly. My joints did not ache tonight. I felt strong. I walked to the door. I did not unlock it immediately. I turned on the porch light, first illuminating the stage. Then I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door, but I left the security chain engaged. The door opened 4 inches. Through the gap I saw them. They were drenched. Paige's hair was plastered to her skull, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face. She was wearing a trench coat that looked ruined. Terrence was shivering, his t-shirt clinging to his chest. They looked like drowned rats. They looked at me through the crack in the door. They saw the warmth behind me. They saw the golden light of the home they had tried to steal. "Dad, let us in." Terrence pleaded, his teeth chattering. "It is freezing out here. We have nowhere to go." My car ran out of gas 3 blocks away. We walked here. I looked at him. I looked at the water dripping from his nose. "Why are you here, Terrence?" I asked. My voice was calm, level. "We need help," Paige cut in, pushing her face toward the gap. "We have no money, Desmond. The accounts are frozen. The credit cards are declined. We haven't eaten since yesterday morning." She looked at me, expecting the pity that had always been there. She expected the soft-hearted Desmond who would give them the shirt off his back. But that Desmond was gone. He died the moment she called him crazy in a courtroom. "I am sorry to hear that," I said. But this is not a shelter, Dad Terrence cried, grabbing the edge of the door. Do not do this. We are family. I am your son, your flesh and blood. You cannot leave your own son out in the rain. Flesh and blood. He played the card I knew he would play. The biological imperative. The guilt card. I looked at him. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the entitlement. He still believed he was owed this. He still believed that being my son granted him immunity from his actions. Wait one moment, I said. I closed the door slightly, just enough to step back to the entry table. I picked up a document I had retrieved from the safety deposit box that morning. It was old. The paper was yellowed and soft with age. I returned to the door. I held the paper up to the gap so Terrence could see it. Do you know what this is, Terrence? I asked. He squinted, blinking against the rain. What? No. Open the door, Dad. This is your adoption certificate, I said. Terrence froze. Paige stopped shivering for a second, staring at the paper. Beatrice and I could not have children, I said, my voice carrying over the sound of the rain. We tried for 10 years. We prayed. We cried. And then we found you. You were 2 years old. You were in the foster system. Nobody wanted you because you were sickly. You cried all night. I looked into his eyes. We chose you, Terrence. We walked into that office, and we pointed at you, and we said, that is our son. We didn't make you by accident. We didn't inherit you. We chose you. We promised to love you and protect you, and we did. For 30 years, we put you first. Terrence looked down. He knew this story. But he had never heard it told like this, not as a bedtime story, but as an indictment. I chose you as a son, I said, my voice hardening. But you. You looked at me and you didn't see a father. You saw an ATM. You saw a nuisance. I folded the paper and put it in my pocket. You chose money as a father, Terrence, I said. You worshipped it. You sacrificed your dignity for it. And when the money ran out, you tried to sacrifice me. Terrence sobbed. It was a loud, guttural sound. Dad, I made a mistake. I know I did. But I am begging you. Rocco is looking for me. If I stay out here, he will find me. He will hurt me. I looked past him into the dark street. I didn't see any black cars, but I knew the wolves were out there. You made your bed, son, I said. You gambled. You stole. You signed contracts with criminals. But you can save me, he screamed, slamming his hand against the doorframe. You have millions. Just write a check. Why do you hate me so much? I don't hate you, I said. Hate takes energy. I am just indifferent. I looked at Paige. She was not crying anymore. She was looking at me with pure, unadulterated loathing. You are enjoying this, she hissed. You sick old man. I am not enjoying it, Paige, I said. I am surviving it. You two planned to put me in a state-run facility. You planned to drug me until I forgot my own name. You planned to kill me slowly by erasing my mind. I leaned closer to the gap. If I let you in tonight, I asked. If I let you sleep in my warm beds and eat my food, how long until you try again? How long until you slip something in my tea? How long until I have an accident on the stairs? We wouldn't, Terrence stammered. We learned our lesson. Liars do not learn, I said. They just get better at lying. I reached for the door handle. Go, I said. Go to a shelter. Go to the police. Go to your parents' Paige if they will have you. But do not stay here. This is Beatrice's house, and there is no room for traitors in Beatrice's house. Dad. No. Terrence wailed. I started to close the door. I love you, Dad, he screamed. I love you. I paused. I looked at him one last time. No, you don't, I said softly. You love what I can give you, and I have nothing left to give. I shut the door. I threw the deadbolt. It clicked with a sound of finality that echoed through the house. I stood there for a moment, leaning my forehead against the cool wood. Outside, I could hear Terrence screaming. I could hear Paige cursing. I could hear the rain pounding against the roof, trying to wash away the sin. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. It was the last tear I would shed for them. I turned around. The living room was warm. The fire was bright. I walked back to my chair. I picked up my book. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call Harper. I just sat in the quiet house that my wife had saved for me. The screaming outside eventually stopped. The sound of footsteps faded into the storm. They were gone. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't lonely. I was safe. I looked at Beatrice's photo on the mantel. "I did it, Bea," I whispered. I closed the gate. The fire crackled in response. The house held me in its wooden arms. I was the guardian of the wall, and the wall held firm. Friday morning arrived with a sky so blue it looked like it had been painted by a child. The air in front of Community First Bank was buzzing with an energy I had not felt in this neighborhood since the block parties of the 90s. A podium had been set up on the sidewalk draped in a banner that read "The Future of District 4. Microphones from 3 local news stations were clustered together like metal flowers. A crowd had gathered. My neighbors were there. Mrs. Johnson was handing out free pastries. Mr. Henderson was wearing his Sunday best, and standing off to the side looking like vultures in expensive suits were the representatives from Apex Realty. They were there because they thought this was a surrender. They thought I was going to announce the sale of the Keystone lot and the subsequent domino effect that would allow them to redevelop the entire block. They thought they had won because they always won. Money always won. I stood behind the glass doors of the bank adjusting my tie. It was a new tie, silk, gold. Beatrice had bought it for me 10 years ago for our anniversary, but I had never worn it because I didn't want to ruin it. Today, I wore it for her. Harper stood beside me. He looked like a general surveying the battlefield. "Are you ready, Desmond?" he asked. I touched the notebook in my pocket. "I am ready." We walked out. The crowd quieted. The cameras turned. The red lights blinked on. I stepped up to the podium. I looked out at the faces of the people I had lived beside for 40 years. I saw fear in their eyes. They were afraid I was going to sell them out. They were afraid the rumors were true. I cleared my throat. "My name is Desmond Bell." I began, my voice amplified by the speakers echoing off the brick buildings. "For 40 years I have lived at number 404 Oak Street. For 40 years I have watched this neighborhood change. I have watched friends move away. I have watched prices rise. I have watched developers circle us like sharks." I looked directly at the Apex representatives. They smirked. They checked their watches. "My wife Beatrice Bell was a teacher," I continued. "She taught your children. She graded your papers. She wiped your tears. But Beatrice had a secret. She was not just a teacher. She was a guardian." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the thick leather-bound ledger. I held it up. For 35 years, Beatrice saved every penny she earned. She invested quietly. She bought the debt of this bakery. She bought the deed to that barbershop. She bought the land under the community garden. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Johnson gasped, covering her mouth. "She did this not to get rich," I said, my voice rising. "She did this to hold the line. She knew that one day someone would come to take it all away. Someone who saw only dollar signs where we see homes." I looked at the Apex suits again. Their smirks were gone. They were frowning. They were whispering to each other. "Last week my own family tried to take my home from me," I said. "They tried to declare me incompetent. They tried to sell the Keystone lot to Apex Realty for a quick payout. They thought I was weak. They thought I was alone." I paused. The silence was absolute. Even the traffic seemed to stop. "But I am not alone. And I am not selling." The crowd erupted. A cheer went up that shook the windows. I waited for it to die down. "I am not selling," I repeated. "Instead, I am giving it away." The Apex lead representative stepped forward. "You cannot do that," he shouted over the crowd. "We have a letter of intent. We have zoning rights." I ignored him. I looked into the news cameras. "Today I am announcing the formation of the Beatrice Bell Community Land Trust," I declared. "I am transferring the deeds of 12 commercial properties and 4 residential lots, including my own home, into this trust. This land will be owned by the community forever. It can never be sold to private developers. It can never be rezoned for luxury condos." Harper stepped forward and handed me a large presentation check. It wasn't for money. It was a symbol. "The trust is endowed with liquid assets totaling $2 million for renovations and small business grants," I said. "And the land value itself is appraised at $15 million. $15 million. The number hung in the air. "This wealth belongs to District 4, I said. "We will build affordable housing. We will expand the library. We will keep our businesses Black-owned and family-operated. Beatrice Bell did not save this neighborhood to sell it. She saved it to free it." The crowd went wild. People were crying. Mr. Henderson was hugging Mrs. Johnson. It was a celebration of survival. The Apex representatives turned and walked away. They walked fast. They knew when they were beaten. They couldn't fight a trust. They couldn't fight a legacy. They had lost the war. I looked up at the sky. It was bright and clear. "I did it, B," I whispered. "It is safe." 5 miles away in a grimy strip mall on the edge of the industrial district, the air smelled of stale grease and despair. Inside the burger barn, the fluorescent lights buzzed with a headache-inducing hum. Paige stood at the sink in the back, her hands plunged into gray, soapy water. She was wearing a polyester uniform that was 2 sizes too big. A paper hat was pinned to her hair, which was frizzy and unwashed. She was scrubbing a deep fryer basket, scraping off burnt batter. Her fingernails, once perfectly manicured, were chipped and broken. Her feet ached in cheap sneakers. She had been fired on Tuesday, sued on Wednesday, evicted on Thursday. And today, Friday, she was a dishwasher making minimum wage. It was the only job she could get that paid cash under the table because her bank accounts were frozen by the lawsuit from Apex. "Hurry up with those baskets," the manager shouted. He was a pimply teenager 10 years younger than her. "We have a lunch rush coming." "I am going as fast as I can," Paige muttered, keeping her head down. She hated the smell. She hated the grease. She hated the world. She looked up at the small television mounted in the corner of the kitchen. It was usually tuned to sports, but today it was on the local news. Breaking news, the banner read. "Local hero donates millions to save historic district." Paige squinted. The screen was grainy. She saw a crowd of people. She saw a podium. Then the camera zoomed in. She dropped the fryer basket. It splashed into the water, sending a wave of dirty suds onto her apron. It was Desmond. He looked distinguished. He looked powerful. He was wearing a gold tie she had never seen. He was standing next to the lawyer, Harper Vance. Paige froze. She couldn't breathe. She leaned closer to the screen, ignoring the manager shouting at her to pick up the basket. $15 million in assets, the news anchor was saying. Desmond Bell revealed today that his late wife Beatrice had quietly acquired nearly 40% of the commercial district. In a stunning move, Mr. Bell has placed all assets into a community trust, ensuring the neighborhood remains protected from developers like Apex Realty. $15 million. Paige's knees gave out. She grabbed the edge of the sink to keep from falling. 15 million. She did the math in her head instantly. It was a reflex. If she had just been kind, if she had just waited, if she had treated Desmond like a human being instead of a nuisance. Terrence was the only heir. Desmond was old. If she had played the long game, if she had been a loving daughter-in-law, she would be controlling a $15 million estate right now. She would be the queen of the district. She would be cutting ribbons and giving interviews. Instead, she was scrubbing grease off a wire basket for $7 an hour. She thought about the $500,000 debt she owed Apex. She thought about the luxury condo she lost. She thought about her car, which had been repossessed that morning. It was all gone. And it was all her fault. She had looked at a gold mine and seen a dirt pile. She had looked at a king and seen a peasant. The news anchor continued. Mr. Bell stated that his family tried to intervene, but he realized that the best way to honor his wife was to give the wealth back to the people who helped build it. Family. He meant her. He was talking about her on live television. A sob ripped from her throat. It was a sound of pure agony. "Hey, lady, are you going to work or what?" the manager yelled. Paige looked at him. She looked at the sink. She looked at the TV screen where Desmond was shaking hands and smiling a smile of pure victory. She screamed. It was a primal scream of regret. She swept her arm across the counter, knocking a stack of clean plates to the floor. They shattered with a crash that echoed the breaking of her own life. "You are fired," the manager shouted, pointing at the door. "Get out! Get out now!" Paige untied her apron. She let it fall to the greasy floor. She walked out the back door into the alley. It was raining. Of course it was raining. She sat down on a milk crate next to the dumpster. She put her head in her hands. She had lost everything. And the worst part was knowing that the treasure she had been hunting was right there in front of her the whole time, wearing a flannel shirt and gardening trousers. She had held the winning lottery ticket and she had thrown it in the trash because it looked wrinkled. She cried until her throat was raw. But no one came to comfort her. No one cared. She was alone in the alley behind a burger joint while Desmond Bell was being crowned a hero 5 miles away. The punishment was absolute. The justice was poetic. And as the rain soaked her cheap uniform, Paige realized that this was not just a bad day. This was her life now. She had built this cage bar by bar with her own greed, and now she had to live in it. 6 months is a long time in the life of a garden. It is enough time for the marigolds to bloom and fade and bloom again. It is enough time for the soil to settle over a grave. And it is enough time for a neighborhood to heal. I stood on my back porch on a warm Saturday afternoon watching the smoke rise from the grill. The smell of hickory and barbecue sauce filled the air, mixing with the laughter of my neighbors. The backyard was full. Mrs. Johnson was manning the potato salad station, her face beaming under a wide-brimmed hat. Mr. Henderson was teaching a group of teenagers how to play horseshoes, and sitting at the picnic table with his sleeves rolled up and a plate of ribs in front of him was Harper Vance. He looked different without his suit. He looked younger. He was laughing at something Mrs. Johnson said, his head thrown back, his smile genuine and unguarded. He came over every Saturday now. Sometimes we discussed trust business, reviewing grant applications for new businesses or approving repairs for the community center. But mostly we just talked. We talked about baseball. We talked about jazz. We talked about life. He was the son I had always wanted. He was the man Terrence could have been if he hadn't been poisoned by greed. Beatrice had chosen him years ago when she paid his tuition, and now I knew why. She saw the iron in his spine and the gold in his heart. Harper saw me watching and waved. He stood up and walked over to the grill, handing me a cold soda. "You are burning the chicken, Desmond," he teased. "I am caramelizing it," I corrected, flipping a drumstick. "There is a difference." Harper leaned against the railing, looking out at the yard. "I got the final papers today," he said, his voice dropping to a confidential tone. "The divorce decree. It is official. Terrence and Paige are no longer married." I nodded, keeping my eyes on the fire. It was inevitable. Rats eat each other when the ship sinks. "Where is she?" I asked. "Ohio," Harper said. "She moved back in with her parents in Dayton. She declared Chapter 7 bankruptcy last week. Apex Realty won the judgment for the contract breach. They are garnishing her wages for the next 10 years. She is working as a receptionist at a dental office." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was brief. Paige was gone. She was a ghost, a bad memory that had been exorcised from this house. She was living the mediocre life she had always feared, and that was punishment enough. "And Terrence?" I asked. The name still tasted like ash in my mouth. Harper pointed toward the alley behind the house. "He is working the afternoon shift," Harper said quietly. "He is on the truck." I walked to the edge of the porch and looked over the fence. The city sanitation truck was rumbling down the alleyway, its brakes squealing. 2 men in neon yellow vests were hopping off the back, grabbing the heavy plastic bins and emptying them into the compactor. One of them was a big man with a beard. The other was thinner, hunched over as if he carried a heavy weight on his shoulders. It was Terrence. He looked older. His hair was thinning and his face was lined with exhaustion. He grabbed Mrs. Johnson's trash bin, dragging it to the truck. He looked up for a split second. Our eyes met across the yard. I didn't see the arrogant man who demanded steak while I ate a burger. I didn't see the gambler who tried to steal my signature in the dark. I saw a broken man. I saw a man who had learned the value of $1 the hard way. He held my gaze for a heartbeat. There was no anger in his eyes anymore, only shame, deep, crushing shame. He looked at the yellow house. He looked at the party he wasn't invited to. He looked at Harper standing beside me, the son who had taken his place. He nodded once, a small jerky movement. Then he turned back to the trash bin. He emptied it, set it down on the curb, and jumped onto the back of the truck as it groaned away. I watched him go until the truck turned the corner. "Rocco got his money," Harper said softly. "Terrence sold his watch, his clothes, everything he owned. He is working double shifts to pay off the interest. He lives in a boarding house on the south side. It is clean, but it is small. He is alive," I said. "That is more than he deserves." "He is learning," Harper corrected. "Finally." I turned back to the party. The music had changed to an upbeat Motown track. Mrs. Johnson was dancing with Mr. Henderson. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over everything. This was what Beatrice wanted. She didn't want a monument of stone. She wanted a living, breathing legacy. She wanted her money to fuel joy, not greed. I walked over to the picnic table and sat down. Harper sat beside me. "You know," Desmond, Harper said, wiping barbecue sauce from his lip, "you could have destroyed him completely. You could have pressed criminal charges. You could have sent him to prison." I shook my head. "Prison is just a room, Harper. Terrence is in a prison of his own making. He has to wake up every morning and look in the mirror and know that he threw away a kingdom for a bet. He has to know that he is emptying trash cans in the neighborhood he could have owned. That is a life sentence." I looked at the house. It stood strong and proud, its yellow paint bright against the darkening sky. Besides, I added, I do not have time for hate. Hate is heavy, it drags you down. I have too much work to do. Harper smiled. We have the ribbon cutting for the new library wing next week, the Beatrice Bell reading room. I smiled back. She would have loved that. She loved books. She said books were the only way to travel without moving your feet. I ate my dinner surrounded by friends. I listened to their stories. I laughed until my sides hurt. I felt the warmth of the community wrapped around me like a quilt. Later that night, after the guests had gone and Harper had driven home, I sat in the living room. I sat in Beatrice's favorite wingback chair. It still smelled faintly of her lavender potpourri. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was full of peace. I picked up the black notebook from the side table. It was my Bible now. I ran my hand over the leather cover. I thought about the doctor's note. Don't go home. Run. I had run. I had run a marathon. I had run through fire and lies and betrayal, and I had crossed the finish line standing up. I thought about Paige scrubbing dishes in Ohio. I thought about Terrence riding the back of a garbage truck. They were living the consequences of their character. They were reaping what they had sown. And me. I was sitting in a yellow house on a hill, the guardian of a legacy, the father of a community. I looked at the photo of Beatrice on the mantel. Her eyes seemed to twinkle in the firelight. I did it, B, I whispered. I cleaned house. I realized then that vengeance wasn't about inflicting pain. Pain was easy. Pain was cheap. True vengeance was thriving. True vengeance was taking the stones they threw at you and building a castle. True vengeance was being so happy, so successful, and so at peace that their existence no longer mattered. I leaned back in the chair and closed my eyes. The best revenge is not killing, I said to the empty room, my voice steady and sure. It is living brilliantly on the failure of the enemy. I fell asleep in the chair with a smile on my face. Tomorrow was Sunday. I would go to church. I would visit Beatrice's grave, and I would tell her that the wall was holding. The neighborhood was safe, the wolves were gone, and the shepherd was awake. Life was good, and it was mine. This journey taught me that true power does not need to scream to be heard. My son and his wife chased the appearance of wealth, the luxury cars, the designer clothes, but they were spiritually bankrupt. They underestimated Beatrice and me because we were quiet, because we lived simply. They mistook humility for weakness. But as they learned the hard way, the loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. Real legacy isn't about what you can show off. It's about who you protect and what you build when no one is watching. Never judge a book by its cover, because the person you try to bury might just be a seed waiting to grow. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to teach someone a hard lesson about respect?